Hi, good morning. My name is Kara Kladzinski and I teach high school ELA at Corey High School. And so for my project, I really tried to incorporate as much as I could from my on-site experience, which was with Accutech. So what I took away from what I could use, and I'll just start off with the standards here, is that I could use, in this lesson, I can use every single of the CEW standards except for two, and that's creating a business plan and budgeting. Those are the only two that I didn't really focus on. However, they could easily be implemented in there. So what I decided to have my students do is instead of focusing on creating a product, was more having them think about what it takes to be an all-star employee and what are those characteristics, and sort of focusing on that and seeing where their prior knowledge comes into what is actually being expected in the workforce. So that's really how I came up with that. It was really interesting while I was at Accutech. What really stood out to me and what kind of helped me shape this lesson is the fact that, especially in the accounting department or the accounts department, was that probably 90% of the people that work there did not go into accounting or marketing or customer service at all. Some of them had biology backgrounds from Allegheny College. So another thing that I wanted to put in there is the fact that just because you go to school for something doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to end up doing. So, and that might be the case for some of you in here as well. So moving on to what the plan is. So I have a 3-part lesson. This is going to, it will vary. And I did it in this way because I did all of high school instead of focusing on a certain grade. So we can look at maybe just doing part 1 and 9th would be appropriate for 9th, 10th graders, where parts 2 and 3 would be more for upper level, but could still be adjusted. You'll notice in the comments as I try to focus on where the standards actually fit in and what some potential issues could be at that area. So I just kind of like docked those in the comments on the side. So the first part is the trade research. Students will brainstorm as the anticipatory set, and I have just like a simple template for that, and these are all links. I made sure that they weren't Google Docs so that they would just pop up. So they would put the topic in here, which would just be like, what are the career skills for the 21st century? What are people looking for? And then they would just branch out with this mind map and fill it in. And they would do that independently. I have that as a think, pair, share, just activity. So they would do that on their own, and then they would break off into pairs, and they would start crossing off anything that wasn't the same as their partner, or simply starring the ones that were the same. And then as a group, we would all come together, and the pairs would share out what everyone had the same. And I think through that discussion, we would see that there are certain things that are really standing out, and we can go from there. To enhance this, I also put in there that they could be ranked. So instead of just filling out the map around the edge, they could actually rank like most important to least important and then share it out, which is another way to make this more of a critical thinking activity with maybe higher level students that a 9th grader, they might not be able to rank them. It might be difficult for them just to come up with enough skills just to fill out the chart. So from there, they would form groups of 4 to 6 depending on the size of the class, and then I would have envelopes prepared that inside would have the different career paths that could potentially they could potentially enter in. Now, a pitfall that I did see with this, so I have listed like the different envelopes that I would have here, like just skilled trade labor, or if they're going to go into manufacturing, engineering, I sort of put that into one. But what might be an issue is the fact that not all the students are going to be interested in whatever their group chooses. So I feel like that you might lose some students that way, which is how I came up with step 2. So what they're going to be doing in step 1, so after the anticipatory set, they'll go into actually researching locally and a more broad search as to what are you seeing on Indeed, Monster, what for employers looking for employees for these positions. What are they saying? What do you need to have? What kind of skills do you need to possess? Or educational background, something like that. So they'll have to do that. The next part with that is that they're going to have to decide on a position that needs to be filled in that discipline. So based on need, they're going to want to act, because they're actually representing this trade. So they're going to be hiring an employee for one position in this field based on need. So they're going to have to do the research to find out, we're in the medical field, as we heard earlier today, the EMTs are in need right now, so then they would, if they picked the medical envelope, then an EMT would be something that they would be trying to fill a position for. Another part, and I have this highlighted in a potential pitfall on here too, is that they would have to interview through email. So I would go over a business email brief lesson on how to write a professional email, which would be an email interview with an HR representative from that discipline to find out, what are you looking for, what issues are you finding, and those kinds of things, so that they can move forward with their search for this assignment. So from the research, these groups are going to create a sample resume of like their ideal candidate for that position. So they'll have a sample of all of that. And then on the side here, I put all of the information that I would be using to help teach these individual lessons. The part 2 is a mock job fair. So since all of these students will be working independently, how are we going to come together so they can see what other jobs are out there and what the other groups were working on? So I came up with a mock career fair that they would present. So each group would get a table that they would have to like decorate and then it would go. They would have to advertise for the position that they were hiring for. So in this job fair, they would have to make a Facebook ad and Instagram ad. So anyone who was interested in like digital photography or just graphic design, that they could create something that would go on Facebook or Instagram, and they could do a commercial in a radio ad for this position that they're looking for. And then they would present all of these things at a table, like in the IMC or in the cafeteria or something like that, where all of the students would be able to see it. And I have all of the information. Another thing that this would go to, especially since I'm teaching ELA, is the power of persuasion, and propaganda and advertising can always be tied into that. So as we move down, you'll see how at the very end here, these are all the rubrics that I would use that would that have the information for how I would grade. Are they using these propaganda techniques? Are they using the appropriate ad campaign to be able to hire for these positions? Where I feel like I'm going to get my students back is in the mock interview. So once they were able to see what positions are available, now they get to apply for these positions based on what they personally like. So even though their group may not have been really interested in whatever that discipline was, so if someone's medical and they were doing manufacturing, I mean, that's not very, I can at least get them back because now they're able to apply for the position that they want. So if they are interested in being a physician's assistant, which I know I have a handful of students that are interested in that, then maybe they would want to apply for the EMT as an entry level, and that's the other issue that's presented in here as well. So with that, they have to create their own resume for that job, present it to the panel of students who were hiring for this position, and then through those resumes, the groups will choose the top resume candidates to call in for a mock interview. And in this process, it would be a whole class discussion where they would be watching the mock interview happen live with their top candidates, and then they would be taking notes pretty similar to what we're doing here, like just some issues they saw, what really stood out about the candidate, and see if that's what ends up with the main group, what they chose. So they'll have to have, so individually, they'll have to have a cover letter, resume, and references. To prepare for the interview, aside from those things, they're also going to have a list of questions to ask the employer. And I have some videos too that I would show the students as sort of like a hook at the beginning to show them like these are the things that you should do in an interview. Go over it briefly and see if they were really paying attention to be able to apply those skills on their own instead of me standing up in front of them telling them you should do this, you should do this. Sort of like learning through failure at the beginning where it doesn't really count for anything, but then they can learn from it in the real world. And then they would have to have, the groups will have, the biggest thing is the thank you letter after. I'm noticing that my students don't understand the basic business etiquette of those kinds of things. But you should, if you're given an interview, you should write a thank you letter. When is it appropriate to be handwritten? When is an email okay? Those kinds of things. Going in appropriate dress as well. Going into the groups, what they'll be doing, the panel in the mock interview, is they will have their ideal resume that they created earlier as a comparison to the one that they have. And then also they will have to have a list of at least 5 questions for the interviewee. And then an employment checklist, like are we checking off enough boxes for this person to even be considered for this job compared to the other candidate? So that was sort of my overall lesson. Basically how they would be assessed are all these different rubrics for the different major sections. What I liked most about this is that it keeps me from doing this and talking at the kids about employment where they're doing all the work on their own and I'm sort of just facilitating that through the classroom because they're doing all of the legwork and the research. I am able to help them. So for the email, I would have a list of potential people that they could email if they don't know. So that, because I could see students being totally turned off if that is something that isn't readily available. I could keep it local too so that students are reaching out to family members or friends, family members that they know of who hold these positions to be able to do the interview themselves. So how I would end this whole, after doing all of these parts with these students, is I would wrap it up with a debrief, which is just a Google form. Oh, I can't touch that, this isn't a smart board. And then they would just complete this. They would do a self-assessment at the end, and then a whole group assessment. What did they like best about it? What was the worst or most troubling parts? What would they do differently? What are some things that could be improved for next time, especially for me doing this maybe next year, since this would be the first time I would roll it out, and just their overall opinion of the project. So they would fill this out, and then I would get some feedback on that. And also class discussions that, just to say, was there anything that really stood out to you that you didn't know about or you weren't anticipating, or what were some things that you pretty much knew going into it were going to happen just to move forward. So that's how I would connect everything that I've learned over the past few months to my ELA classroom. Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead, Dad. Open floor.
I like the idea of the students particularly maybe working on an area that wouldn't appeal to them at first, because I think it teaches them that you might not get the career path you want at the beginning of your career. You may have to work toward it. So don't be afraid to go into something. Look at something that isn't necessarily in
right, and that was exactly my thought process. Just because you think you want to be a physician's assistant, but you haven't looked at anything else, that they're sort of forced in multiple avenues to see what else is out there, even though they might be closed off to it right now.
But then you bring them back in when they can go to the career fair and look at the different jobs. And
right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
I was just going to say you probably want to add something about a handshake. That's always super important too.
That's actually in the video, and that's in the video that I was going to show them. It goes through all of those kinds of things, just how you dress, how you sit, what questions you ask, because I think that's also another part that even adults don't realize that at the end, you should really flip the interview.
Yeah.
They've asked you questions now, why should you hire me?
Yeah.
Or why should I want to work here?
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't think they realize, depending on the day, we might just pull them into an interview right then and there when they come in to apply for a job.
Yeah.
So if you come in jeans and a t-shirt, and we're pulling you in to at least see the HR director, it makes an impression.
That's good to do.
And then if somebody really likes doing this project, you know they should work in HR.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So go with HR.
I liked how it's immersed in the English language arts, and I think that's spot on. I mean, those kids are walking out with a repertoire of 13.2. You could tell that you were spot on in those career acquisition documents, getting the job. I really like that. Really good. Connecting with human resources representatives, do you have those connections?
I do have those connections through Acutech now, but I also do just from, because I worked in retail, and I still have connections through that way. And then also I taught adult education in Corey, so I have all of those local jobs, and that was the other part that could be manipulated. So in keeping the kids local, so if they are interested in the medical, that maybe in Corey it would be for us LECOM in the hospital, so they can see, hey, we have those here in this, because we are losing so many educated people because they feel that there's no need to come back. And it might be a good way to keep them here. It's like, hey, we value you, your family is here, when you're done with your education, come back, because there is a place for you here.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of reaching out to somebody in the community, because I think a lot of young people have a hard time with that. So
Or
that's
talking
really
to adults
nice.
at all.
Yeah, yeah, that's really nice. And maybe they'll make a long-term connection, you never know, so.
I definitely feel a lot of physician assistant people and physician assistant contact, if you have the Corey Hospital HR director, that would be great.
Any other questions?
We know who's next? Keith?
Yeah.
See of that?
Yeah.
Sure, roll it out. What grades, Carol? I know you had said potentially from 7 to 12. What grades do you teach?
I teach seniors.
Seniors?
I teach 12th grade.
Okay, perfect.
So that's why it was kind of difficult for me. I didn't want to pigeonhole
Yeah.
and just do something. So I was like, this could be broken up. It wouldn't necessarily have to do all 3 parts. You could just do the first part, or
Sure.
the first and second. You could even do just the second part. Any of the parts could just be done in isolation.
We trying to get into Google, Keith?
Yeah. Well, I had to sign her out.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
All right, is that?
Well, you won't be able to sign there. It's my credential. Just go to Google.com. Did that URL?
Yeah, I don't think I signed anything. So I'll just open that up. I'm pretty sure.
So, some of you might be familiar with Google Classroom. I don't know if the business people are you guys familiar? If you're not, I'll explain that real quick. It's a great teaching tool. I am not a classroom teacher. I'm a school counselor, but I go into the classroom, and so I've kind of picked up on some of these things. And so I have my own classroom, and so what I do is when I go in and do activities, I actually post stuff, and kids can get into the classroom that way. So teachers, you guys are like, yeah, I do all this all the time. So, what I did before I get started. I actually printed these out. So I don't know if you. Oh, not that one. So this is my lesson plan. It's very short compared to the other two. Thank you guys for setting the table nicely for me. Now I am an elementary school counselor, so obviously things are a little bit different at the elementary level as opposed to the high school. Before I get rolling, I just want to thank, IU. This was a great program. I was kind of Teacher in the Workplace was done years ago, and I didn't participate then. So I'm glad I got the opportunity to do that with you guys, Nick and Ann and Hannah, and I think even Mike helped me a couple times at some point. So thank you for doing that, and then the business people just coming and taking your time to do this. We really appreciate it. So why don't we? I'll talk a little bit about my visit to Accutech. I know Rachel wants to opt out, but really enjoyed going in there and learning. I think much like Phil, I think I was very, you have this thought of what it's going to be like when you go in, and then when you actually go in and see this stuff, you're like, wow, this is really clean, really awesome, very organized. People seem very happy, very motivated, very driven to be doing their jobs, and it was just a great experience. I think it was awesome to sit and eat lunch and talk to the CEO, the fact that they would take time and talk with us and share things and just how the process works. So I felt like that was extremely valuable, and I don't know if this might be something to consider in the future, but if we could do a visit for half a day somewhere and go somewhere else too, because I think, like, I would love to go on to Meadville maybe, or to the home and just see some different things and get that perspective. So, because I gained so much just from one business, I'd like to see what else was out there. So, why don't we just jump in? You look at my lesson plan there. There's kind of 2 lessons. I only have 45 minutes with the kids, so it's very, 5 minutes. If you ever work with elementary kids, I'm going to take them 5 minutes to get into their desk and write their pencils. Probably same as high school, right?
Middle school, 6, 7 minutes.
Yeah, so you're kind of limited time-wise. So getting into the material is really important, getting it done quickly. So I kind of, wanted to jump in with a video, and Phil, I love your videos. I only had 5 minutes set aside, and I thought, oh man, I could probably use one of those, and that would be great. So I didn't have anything picked yet for a video. I had one short one, but I thought, no, that would be very appropriate, and I think the kids would love it, even at that age level. So, then we'll kind of jump into, there's a few things I want to show you as far as what I'm going to go to. So this I would spend some time, again, this is elementary level, so spend some time talking about some of these things that they need. So when we do our group activity, I want them to be able to communicate, and I want them to understand what that sounds like, what that looks like. And a lot of kids, at 5th grade and even at high school level, don't know how to work in a group and really just talk to people. I teach social skills, talk about how to be assertive. Just tell people what you want or need in a calm, respectful way, and that's very difficult for a lot of kids. So just kind of going through some of these expectations of, everybody loves to talk. But how many people when I ask that question, who loves to talk? They're all like, oh yeah. Who likes to listen? And it's like, nobody puts their hand up. So, if you like to listen, you can be a counselor. But, so talking about just the importance of listening to people, listening to their ideas. If you have a teammate you're working on that group, and they have a great idea, but you don't take the time to listen to them, you might miss out on a great opportunity or great idea for your group. So again, those are kind of just elementary type pictures. And then we talk about some of the essential workplace skills. This is you know, based on our visit a little bit, and also just what you need no matter what job you're going to. And this is obviously not an extensive list, but ones I felt were appropriate for part 2 of the lesson. So. Take some time, watch the video, go over that, and then the next one would be, so I wanted them to start thinking about, we have these work statements down the left-hand side, and I wanted them to take a little bit of time, and this would be difficult, I believe, for elementary, to rank from 1 to 5 what they feel like they would want to do. You know, so they're going to have to read these sentences, kind of keep them in there, and go, okay, which one really kind of, you know, I would relate to the most, and then rank the next one. And so based on that, they actually will tell them what job that identifies with, okay? And then we would use that for part 2 of the lesson. We'd actually try and group them. So you need like engineers, you need some manufacturers, you need maybe somebody who's handling the money, you need, you know, so we go down through these jobs. And I show you, that one on there. But, so we go ahead and use that. That's the end of for lesson 1, basically. Watch the video, talk about how we're going to interact as a group, get them to rank these things, and then I take that information, and then based on that, I'm going to split them into groups for lesson 2. Okay? So if you look at lesson 2, go ahead, we're going to start off reviewing soft skills again, because it might be a few days in between, it might be a week. Because sometimes I go in twice a month, so I'm not in there every time. So back to back is very difficult sometimes. Divide them up into the groups, and then I pass out this company roster. So we get them in the groups, and then I'm going to say, hey, here's your sheet, here's your company roster. Now you guys need to work together. You've already kind of last time identified, hey, who's like kind of the engineering type, who would like to handle the money, we got some quality control in there, some people like to be the boss, you know, be the supervisor, we have quite a few of those. You know, and who would actually just like to work on this? So the whole project is they have to manufacture Hershey Kisses, okay? And, you know, of course I bring in a bag of the real stuff, you know, and they're all salivating and wanting some of those, but we give them supplies, and they have to buy these supplies, and I know we kind of worked that into our lesson last year. So they have to buy these supplies, then they sit and talk about it as a team, how are we going to build the best Hershey Kiss that we can, okay? And then I give them 3 minutes to go ahead and start doing this, and they get 3 minutes to do that. At the end of 3 minutes, hands off, you gotta leave it, and then what I'll actually do is go around to the groups. And if they've created a Hershey Kiss that looks pretty good, I will actually buy it from them. And then they get more money, so they get more supplies. They can buy more supplies. And then we do another round of doing that. So I actually tested this out on Friday. It was very interesting. My first group, I had a number of students who, personality-wise, have a lot of difficulty working with others in groups. So I mean, I had a couple kids that just could not handle, the group wasn't listening to their idea, you know, I didn't feel like they were being, you know, valued or whatever. I mean, I had a couple kids, 5th graders, hey, come on over here, they were crying, you know, like, I mean, it was traumatic for some of these kids to work in groups. It's not something that we get a whole lot of opportunity to do at the elementary. I mean, you're very much teachers up front talking, doing these things, so the kids don't get the chance to do this. And then most of the kids were fine though, and so they had a great time doing it. They really enjoyed it. We had some Hershey Kisses that looked pretty good. I actually had someone, one of the staff members, like, hey, you got Hershey? Yeah, you want one? You know, and the way we make them, I don't know if that's listed somewhere on the lesson plan. They have glass pebbles that you can buy like at the dollar store. They're kind of thin and round, and then they get the foil and they get the ribbon, and then they go ahead and do that. So I mean, they turned out pretty decent, and the kids really liked it. I could not find any fake money for my lesson, so we're using poker chips. So I didn't get any parent phone calls, I don't think yet. So But again, the kids like the idea of creating something, working together, using these roles to do these types of things. One of the things I already know I have to adjust in my lesson is I ran out of time towards the end, and to get 5th graders to do open-ended questions, it's very difficult. You need more than 10 minutes to do that. So I feel like if I had a checklist, some type of Google checklist, and then go in and check off, hey, we use this soft skill or we use this word, that would work much better. So I already know, based on doing the lesson just a couple times, what's working, what's not. The kids really just organize them and help them out. I don't know that I would change too much else other than, like I said, the timing. It's very hard to do this in 45 minutes. I could probably do it in an hour, would be more feasible, but you work with what you got. So. And I think that's my lesson in a nutshell. Yeah, I feel like good.
All right, question time.
Yeah.
What do you got for them?
I couldn't have done that good of a job.
With seeing that some of the kids have trouble working in teams, would that spark any discussion about the teachers in the grades to maybe start looking at some new kind of concepts? Because that really is, especially with social media and the isolation of not having to converse with people in a physical sense, we see a lot of people as adults that have a real difficult time.
Yeah, and just the one teacher that they came and picked up their class, I'm like, boy, they just really struggled to do that. And they're like, yeah, I know, it's very difficult to take the time to do group activities. See, we're on such a, at least from my perspective being in education, I feel like we're on such a tight schedule, and we run a master schedule at the elementary. It's not like when I went to school, I had one teacher, you had them pretty much all day, and you hung out with them and did stuff. No, we're going, reading whole group, reading small group, reading or math whole group, math small group. You're to Title I, you're to science, you're to your special, you're to lunch, recess, and days over. And trying to fit and meet the standards. I know the teachers know what I'm talking about. You're working very hard to try and meet those standards. So group work, it does take time, and I think the teachers recognize that. Hey, these kids are struggling with these types of things. So yeah, will it spark some more conversation? Yeah, I think we can talk about that. And it might even change the way I approach my other social skill lessons and trying to integrate more teamwork into those things to allow those kids to work together. So absolutely, yeah.
Do you do programs at a certain grade level?
Yeah, so I go in and teach twice a month in 4th grade and 5th grade, and I use a program called Second Step. And so Second Step is just social emotional skills. We're talking about being assertive. We're talking about how do you listen to people, problem solving. So we're touching on a lot of those things that are needed for the workplace and just for everyday, just functioning as an adult, Yeah.
That's what I liked about that part. Like, you moved away from, you called them essential workplace skills rather than soft skills.
Right.
Kudos for that.
Yeah.
Those are essential life skills. That's right.
Oh, no worries. My suggestion would be, allowing students to work on their, where they feel strong, their strong suits, personality-wise. Like, I like being an engineer, or I like being hands-on with this stuff. Maybe halfway through, have them switch it up, draw from a hat.
Yeah,
Start to kind of mix. So, man, I'm not comfortable with money, but now I have this big responsibility, and I have to be in charge of that and own it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, creating a little bit of anxiety and doing something different.
Yeah, it might take their mind off of working with people and just like,
Yeah, absolutely. That would be good. All right, anything else?
Jeff, I never collected Kara's feedback cards, and I also have Keith's. So Kara cards in my left hand, Keith cards. Kara?
here's Keith cards.
Keith? All right. Kara? Anybody have Kara? Keith cards?
Yep. Probably saying, you do this. I'm saying that. Not that.
I have no problem taking trees. Well, somebody will respectfully tell you to knock it off.
Yeah, see, that's what they're being taught.
elementary. It wasn't it.
Children, because they'll face the news.
I've done,
Things like this don't bother me at
And the
all.
one
I've done JA.
Yeah.
Same thing.
But you know,
Meltdowns with the groups and stuff. So,
I
like, you know that
it's
it's not just situational. It's not just who they were in the group with.
I've always been a dude.
It's partly them. Like,
Yeah,
it's
so
not
like-
all-
Guys, we're not gonna take an official break, so if you want to, just kind of jump out into the restroom or use, grab yourself another snack or whatnot.
So it helps me to actually take notes. Because sometimes I go and I'm thinking about stuff. No, unrelated. Like work stuff. Like all of a sudden I'm on this other team. I'm like, wait, we're here. That's cool. It makes me very creative.
Oh, hey, that's what
But
happened.
no,
What do you want to do?
because I'm
Okay.
Bring the
like,
pulpit if
did
you
you
want.
ever send them like no?
No, can you repeat?
All right, hello everyone. I'm Adam Brewer. I have the pleasure of teaching 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, so like the glory years of school. Some of our teachers teach 7th and 8th a little bit. Most of them teach 7th or 8th. I have 7th, 8th, or 9th. So they say like in middle school, if you teach middle school, it doubles your age as a person when you teach. But since I have 7th, 8th, and 9th, I'm looking at dog years. So I'm like 6 years in, but 42 years experience, pretty much. So this is why I don't look as good as Carr or Keith when I come up here and we'll like run down and beat up. Yeah, that's because I have 7th, 8th, and 9th. So I had more planned, actually. I had a PowerPoint I was going to do and stuff. But last week, my wife and I, we decided to buy a house. She had a baby, and we adopted our daughter in 1 week. So, I haven't slept in days. We're just running on coffee and donuts. So here we go. So my class that I'm setting this up for is the 9th grade class that I have. Our school does something that's called seminar, and it's a fancy name for basically getting the kids thinking about careers. So I really thoroughly enjoy the class because I get to do this stuff every day. So we take the whole entire 9th grade, we break it up into 9-week class. So I only have them for 9 weeks. They come in, we talk about careers, we talk about college, we talk about budgeting, we do activities like these that we're talking about today. I'm able to take some of our kids to a place called Viking Plastics, so they do get to actually, all of them get to see manufacturing. It's literally like right down the road from our school, so it's very nice. And we get to have these discussions all the time. So this was perfect for me when I got the call that you could come and do this, and I was all about it. And so what I decided to do in the past, when I taught social studies, we used to talk about how when manufacturing exploded and the Industrial Revolution and things like that. So social studies, to me, is kind of hard. Is there any social studies teachers here? Social studies? Yeah. I like to bring things to like real life, you know, and try to make it as real as possible. And I always thought, man, if you get some paintball guns, go out and recreate the Revolutionary War, that'd be great, but you can't do that these days, you know. And the kids, they would, you know, that'd be like a lesson. Remember when Mr. Brewer shot me with a paintball? So can't do that. But so as much as I could do to bring it to life, what I've done was I talked about the Industrial Revolution. I actually went one time and I got hard noodles, and made necklaces. And I set the kids up in an assembly line. And I gave them a piece of fishing line, and they just put one noodle, and they had to follow the design. And they passed it down the line, and they had the very end of the line, it had to come out into a necklace. And every kid had a job, and I talked about how it was dirty and dungy, and I made them lean over desks like this for a long period of time, and how it was like not good working conditions, and so on and so on. And by the time they were all said and done, someone had to be in sales and sell the necklace to students walking down the hallway, you know? And they're working really hard, and I had students who had stories made up from here, I'm from this country, because I would just fire kids at random, like you're fired. Like, why? You're not working fast enough. Or I just don't like you, because there wasn't anything to protect you with like the laws and stuff that actually go like that in manufacturing today or businesses. And so the other kid would come in and have to just pick right up, and you know, they found out that manufacturing wasn't fun. It wasn't, you know, something like, man, this is tough work. And I had kids moving books from one end of the room to the next, and they do the same thing over and over again. You know, and they didn't spend time like they did today solving problems, working together, coming up with ideas on how to innovate, making it better. You know, they had people who were in charge telling them what to do. You just followed suit. Hopefully you could keep your job and you were a tough worker, and we didn't really care about your feelings, or if you smash your hand in the books and stuff like that, you're done. You can't leave. So that was something I've done in my 8th grade classes. But with my 9th grade classes, I kept looking for something a little different, and the fan lesson was like perfect. So our school was able to purchase all the things that we did with the fans and build that. So now I'm incorporating that in my lesson. And so I stole your thunder a little bit. So I appreciate that. So it worked. So what I did was I am going to actually, I was supposed to do this past week, was actually run this lesson, but I wasn't around school at all this whole last week because I've been a little busy. So the first day, what I was wanting to do with my kids is I talked to them a lot, even before we go on the field trip. I talked to them a lot about like what is manufacturing, their thoughts, their ideas, and basically it's the same thing that if you don't go to it, you think dungy, dirty. I do the same thing over and over again. I pull a press, you know, so on and so on. Now this kind of focuses on manufacturing. But I don't always, I know there's a big push for manufacturing, but what I'm trying to do in my classes is give them more of an opportunity to do the things that we need to do in any business, which is thinking, being able to communicate well, being able to work in groups, because not everyone, even in manufacturing, as cool as it is, wants to work in manufacturing. I loved Acutech, I thought it was great. I still don't think it would be for me to sit there working on this stuff, working in teams or doing something behind the scenes or being in sales. Sign me up. I could probably do that stuff. But still, maybe not for me, but what I'm trying to get is to have the kids find their niche for like what they like to do. So if I like to be in talk or speak in front of people, how many jobs out there allow you to do that? You know, if this is where you feel comfortable, then you find the job that suits you best. And it may not be in manufacturing. It may not be in hospitals or healthcare or so on and so on. You might find something that's out there that you're like, man, I never thought I would ever do this. I knew absolutely, I would never be a teacher when I was a kid. Never going to do it. I missed it by a sit-up. So I found out that I was really good at talking, and I like to talk about things that I like. So teaching worked out perfect for me. And I found that out later on in college when I was there, and I went for undecided. That was my major. And so I think a lot of our kids, the push is, go to college. It's the only way you're going to be successful. And I don't do that. I don't believe in that. And as I get older, I find out there's more things that I like to do, and it's almost kind of funny, but it's like I still think about, well, what else could I do? What else is out there? What else, I could be good at this, or I could be good at that. So that's kind of how I push things. But for the lesson, being that it's in manufacturing, I talked to them a little bit about old school and new school. Now, Phil stole my video, the first one. So I'm stealing his, the second one, because I didn't have a second one about what's new school manufacturing, so Phil, I'm going to steal your thunder on that one, okay? What I wanted to do is I compare and contrast the two with the kids. Like, here's what you thought about. So the discussion is, my question to pose to them is, what makes people stand out? What makes them stand out among the rest? Anyone?
They work hard.
They work hard. Someone else have an idea?
Attitude.
Attitude? What makes someone like, oh man, in school they are this person?
So they have a lot of friends.
Kind?
They're friends. Middle school kids would probably say they're friends.
They're friends, okay? So everyone has an idea of what makes someone stand out. In school, you could be the best football player. You could be the prettiest girl, or there's all these things that make you stand out. You could be the smart. Everyone knows, oh, who's the smart kid? So the kids they know this stuff, like what makes them stand out. But what we don't really tell them, and what they don't really know, is that everyone has something, some quality that allow them to stand out in a certain area. And I like when we do business week, you find out that the kids, when they get together, the seniors get together for business week, they don't really know each other, and they all get together, and it's kind of awkward, and I never worked with this person before, I never talked to this person before. But at the very end, they find out, man, this person can draw, and this person can talk, and this person can sell this thing. And man, they really come together and find out, well, I do have a niche. There is something that I'm really good at. you know? And so in school, the kids, I mean, they see this, you know, and so I talk to them, so what makes someone stand out compared to somebody else? You know, and then I use that as, okay guys, so when you go someday to get a job, what's going to make you stand out more than the next person or the other 10 people that have applied for the same job that you have, that you have applied for? And so I get them thinking about, hey man, it's important for me to take the extra step, go the extra mile, think a little bit outside the box, be prepared for when that time comes. So let me get back to this. I'm sorry I'm on a rabbit trail, but so I took it early manufacturing and today's manufacturing. I compare the two, and then we have discussions in groups like what is different, what has changed, is your view different about today's manufacturing compared to what it used to be or what you thought it would be, and we talk about those things. And I just use a compare and contrast chart basically, and the discussion after we show the videos. Being that it's in 9th grade, it's really to open their minds up a little bit and get them thinking about, like, manufacturing is not just pulling a lever every day. Maybe I like to just pull the lever every day. It might fit you. Maybe I want to work behind the scenes, because when I say manufacturing, we don't think about the CEOs, the sales, the purchasing agents, and the HR, and all these things. And that can be incorporated in any job that's out there. Hospital, does anyone work in a hospital? Immediately everyone's like, I can't do blood and poop. You don't always do that, you know? Like they don't know that because that's just what they see. This is what this is what's going to happen every day. I can't be a nurse. Well, there's so many other jobs. And hospitals don't relate to you being a nurse. You don't even have to touch it. You know, my wife works in hospitals, and they started doing the different color scrubs thing because everyone who sees her in scrubs immediately thinks she's a nurse, you know, and she does x-rays. So she has no idea what they're talking about. Even her parents are like, well, you work in a hospital. What is this? What's wrong with this thing? I don't do that. You know, I'm an X-ray. So that's kind of like the mindset that's been for the basis for a very, very long time. So I'm trying to get our kids to think outside of the box a little bit and see things a little bit differently. Especially since they're in 9th grade and they can't they don't really think beyond what's happening 5 minutes from now. And when you tell them, like, hey guys, we're going to look at these jobs, they're like, I just got to 9th grade, I don't care. Like, all right, well, we're going to do it anyway. So day 2, what I decided to do was kind of take the same idea that I have with the necklaces and do it with the fans. Now I was going to basically break them up into groups. We were going to do the old assembly line thing. The fan was going to come down. We put one piece on, and by the time it gets to the very end, I leave it a little bit open-ended, so it's like, I don't care how you guys do it, but by the time it gets to the end of your line, it has to be a completed project or product. And then I'm going to decide at the very end, as the consumer, which fan I'm going to buy. So, and it's a race, okay? So they're competing with the next manufacturing company to compete and build as many of these fans as possible and get them down the line and do it as quickly as possible. And it's going to be hectic, and they're all going to be like, trying to get this done. And at the very end, whoever I buy more fans from would win the competition and so on. So basically, one person was in charge of how the fans would be built. Then they would basically do the design on the board and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Once they have it all ready to go, there's a time limit. Once the time limit is up, they redesign the product to make it better and faster, and get it down the line a little bit quicker than what the other team would do. So kind of started off with a friendly competition, but make it as hectic as possible. And I'm not saying that all manufacturing back then was hectic and stuff, but I want to put them under a little bit of pressure, okay? And then day 3, basically I'm going to the new school manufacturing and go off of what I've learned in the past couple weeks. And so it's going to work in teams, pick roles, design together, okay? I think it's part of the biggest thing when it even comes to schools, businesses that are succeeding, everyone feels valued. I feel like that's one of the biggest things that some of the businesses, even schools, if they're not working right, it's because I've got one person in charge trying to do all this stuff, and this is how it's going to go, and they don't value the ideas or the education that their employers bring to the table when they hire them. And a lot of these people have great ideas, and it's just like in Business Week, They might be quiet about it and not really know, but no one's ever asked them, hey, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? And when I was at AccuTech, even while I was there, someone had a problem with something was in one of the machines, and 5 to 6 people came, got together, figured it out. All right, here's how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to make it better. And I think some of the bigger companies that I see that are doing very well are because they've incorporated everybody and they valued everybody. And I was amazed, the biggest thing that I was amazed about was AccuTech, the CEO knew everybody's name. Down to the janitors, custodial staff, you know, they're very important people, but like, she knew everyone by their first name, and I was impressed by that. Because I've been in, like, the lunch line before with the superintendent we used to have long, long ago, and he didn't even know who I was, you know? And I'm not hitting on that, but it's just like, that's how important that her employers were to her. And you feel valued, you're gonna produce more, you're gonna work harder because I matter, you know? And so with that, on day 3, the design together part, cost effective, the best design, manufacture it, and come out with, here's how we're going to compete now in today's new manufacturing against all the other companies out there. We're gonna come up with the best design. We're gonna come up with the cheapest way to kind of make it, but we're also going to be looking for the quality part of it. So what I want to do is I want them to see, okay, so if you make it as cheap as possible, does it work as good? You know, because we have, like us, we buy quantity and quality. Quantity over quality or quality over quantity, depends what you're going to pay for that. So I look at it that way. They design it and kind of go through the same thing by me buying or purchasing, or what I was going to do, if not me, have the students, there's a team of students who are going to pick 2, 3 students. This is the best one that I like, right here. And so if they're buying all of this company's one, this company 2 is going to have to redesign their product, make it faster, make it be able to spin, put out more more output, more energy through the fan. And we have the electrodes and stuff to hook to it to make sure we can see. So it's going to be more relaxed atmosphere. You're not going to produce as many, but you're going to be making the best one competing with the other groups that way. And then that way everyone feels like they have a role, a design, and maybe the role that you had before is not working for me, and then that new leader kind of like rises up and everyone goes with that. Maybe someone is just happy with putting it together. Maybe someone is very happy with designing it and then maybe selling the product, because I'm also going to have them sell it to me. I'm going to talk to like their sales reps and say, okay, why do I want to buy yours over this one? And so on and so on. So I have a lot of different ways that I can go with this. I haven't really tested it yet with the students, but within, well, probably this week or next week, we're going to roll this out. Not next week, because it'll be Christmas, but when we come back from that, we're going to roll this out and do this in my class. How I want to look, that's basically for the assessment of students. I don't really look at this as giving them an overall grade as far as like, you guys got an A or you got a B and this and that. What I want to see is, I want to see them working together. So basically talk to them about, okay, here's what's going to happen, guys. You're going to work together, you're going to write a reflection on what they learned about manufacturing and how their perception of manufacturing has changed. And then what I want to talk to them about is, when it's all said and done, okay, yes, we're focused on manufacturing, but how does this carry over into other businesses, other jobs, other careers that are out there? You know, is there different avenues that you can take in the healthcare areas, or being in law, or being in education? I mean, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to education, be a teacher. Well, no, you can be a guidance counselor. You can be, you know, the principal, so on and so on. There's different avenues that are out there for everybody. I'm fortunate because I get to have that class and we get to look at tons of different things. I get a lot of good feedback from the kids once they finally buy into the class, that they're like, oh wow, I can do this, or wow, they make this much money. But basically, the thing that I've found with the kids is, you just go and you just do this. Or I just apply to this college and I get in. Like, where do you want to go to college? I'm like, oh, Ohio State. Okay. Do you know that you only, you know, less than 50% of the people get in there? They're like, brother? Like, yeah. You have to work hard to get in there? They're like, oh, they just assume everything just comes to them. That's one of the biggest things that I've found out with our kids, is that if they want it, just get it. And then, like after high school, when the real world hits, what do you mean I have to compete for 10 other people to get this job? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You wrote your resume in crayon. You know, why? You know, and I'm very real with the kids. You know, I try to make it. I'm like trying to make it a reality factor for them. And they're like, oh, well, you hurt my feelings because at least I did it though. That's there. At least I did it. Well, so did 10 other people, but they've done it better. You know, and so I try to make it as real to them as possible in the class. I love this, that we were able to partake in this. I wish the kids, I've used Accutext, you're saying about life's unfair to ease too. I had it on the board that day. I'm like, how do you feel about this statement? You know, that was one of my questions. How do you feel about the statement? Life's unfair to ease to it. And they write some interesting things, you know, but they don't want to feel that unfairness, you know. So this would be perfect for them because this allows them to compete, allows them to say, hey, he's not or they are not buying my product. How do I make it better? What do I got to do? What do I got to change? How can we work together to make it better? Who's not working? You know, you have people that just like, they're taking their time. Well, you're not an employee. You know, you're not helping us. So this lesson is supposed to resemble all that. So, and basically on my reflection end of it then, I'm looking for students, how the standards are being met. I have the standards at the top, whatever is already shown. Are they thinking, are they changing their design by trial and error to make it better? The biggest thing is getting the engine started, I call it. You know, you have to, like, they're there, they're parked in the driveway, you have them in there, but like, the engine's not running sometimes. And you just got to get it going, and then you got to get them in a destination that they want to get, and that's what the class is designed to do. Start thinking about, I'm in 9th grade now, what should I do in 10th, 11th, 12th grade to prepare me for college, or prepare me for the workforce, or military, and then what's beyond that, how am I, you know, and once I'm there, then what am I going to do? How am I going to do this, so on and so on. So I look forward to doing this lesson, and I hope you found it somewhat interesting.
Feedback, questions for Adam?
Bring it on, hit me with it, I'm good with this.
One of the things that stood out for me is I like that your message there about your awareness related to your interests and abilities and the avenues that could align to that. Just personal experience, I never had that.
I think a lot of our kids lack that, you know, it's the real world stuff. You know, a lot of kids look at us, me in particular, like, you're just saying that because you're a teacher and you get paid to say it. Like, no, you're not going to have a job someday if you say this to your employer, you know? Like, you can't do that. And so I think like the real world experiences is what they really need, you know? And you ask them about things and like, well, on Facebook it says this.
Oh
Like,
my God.
you know, like I just, and the real world stuff, when I get to take them on these tours, and everyone's asking like, what should I say to these kids? Be as sincere and as honest as possible.
You should have Rachel come to your class.
Like, sometimes they just need the bomb dropped on them, and they're like a reality check, and you know, I just think a lot of our kids, with the way things go in schools, and I'm not hitting on schools, but like how laws pass down, there's so much support, so much help to just kind of carry them along. There isn't, and all of a sudden when you get to the real world, you know, that's gone, you know. So a lot of our kids, if you have, I would say, if you have students come and observe, come on tours and stuff, hit them with the reality of life. Like, you are competing against everyone else who wants this job. You are competing against, you know, you want to do something someday. You want to stand out among the rest. You have to do it. You have to actually do it. And it's not everyone gets a job, or not everyone just, you know, I graduated high school. Where are the jobs at? You know, bring them on. So you have to do this stuff, and I think a lot of our kids, from at least in my perspective, in 9th grade, think that. So I'm working hard to make them so that when they go to car someday and they get to the 12th grade year, they kind of actually understand, oh man, I got to do this and I got to do this, and here's the real world experience that she's going to give them down the road. So
It's really amazing because we hire 15, 16, 17-year-olds in some of our departments, and the interesting thing is when they leave for college, you know, they do their exit interview and what they've learned. that kids who have never worked during high school, I'm talking about a 15-hour-a-week part-time job or something, you know, it's amazing how much better prepared they are.
Oh yes, I looked at some stats before. Kids who work during high school are, like they said, it's like roughly around 20% more successful than kids who don't. And I'm not just saying with getting a job, it's like being even more successful than kids who don't work during high school. So I encourage my students all the time to get some part-time job or something. My dad made me paint every day of my life, and I hated it. I said I would never do that again, but I can paint pretty well now. So, but I talk to my kids about those types of things.
Are you guys or do you do anything where there's like a career assessment or like a kind of like, here's some things I like to do, and that kind of guides me in understanding myself?
In the class itself, and then the guidance counselors that come down, I have a ton of different surveys I have them do. That's like pulling a lot of hair too, because they're like, what? 100 questions? Ah! Like, it's okay, you just click it like this, you read it, click. So that's tough, but they get through it, you know, they go through it, and eventually when they do it, like a lot of times, what I find is a lot of our students today, they're just doing the work because they're told to do it. They've had this notion through school, not asking them like, okay, so here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to build, da 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 da. They're just going to do it, and then at the end of it, you're like, so what'd you get? Like, I don't know. I'm like, well, did you read the thing? Did you actually understand what you were doing? You know, when we did this assessment, what kind of jobs did it give you? Because this is important. And then they're like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to read that. Yeah, you know, so, but that's ninth grade. I mean, that's why I have 46 years experience.
But even Rachel, even at the elementary, we're doing that. I mean, we do a careers from the inventory, and even my son came home, was in 4th grade, and I was doing it in the classroom, and he said, hey, I got engineering and manufacturing. Like, that was his group, his pathway. They scored highest in.
Yeah.
So kids are getting that.
Oh yeah,
Starting to understand.
no, they really are. It's becoming more, now that the class has been incorporated, the kids have talked about it a lot more. So the kids coming up are like, oh, I know, I've heard that you guys do this, and I heard you do that. And they kind of look forward to it. And now that they're doing it when they're younger, then when they get to the class itself, then they're like, okay, I've done these surveys, I kind of know what's going on. We do a lot of the surveys, and then we have, I have them look at tons of different jobs, and then I have them take jobs they think they want to do, and we do a budget plan. And it's so funny to see 9th graders do these budget plans, because they'll do the budget plan, and they're like, oh, I need to make $175,000 a year to live my life. And you're like, oh, yeah, because the job you picked makes 42. And they're like, oh, wow. You mean I can't have 5 Camaros? No, you can't. Oh, wow. So it's kind of like this reality thing. They're like, oh, man. And the kids, it's so funny because they're always over. They think that they can afford, oh, man, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. Next thing you know, they're like, I live in a shack, I can't do it. You know, and so that's fun to do with them, too.
Well, my daughter is taking this class, and she came home with it, and I think she picked like a $350,000 house. She picked a used car, which I was really proud of. What job are you going to get? You know, and so having those conversations.
And that's why I like to do the reality part, because I don't tell them. They're like, do you think a $350,000 home's good? I'm like, yeah, put it down. And at the very end, they're like, oh. And I'm like, exactly. So, and then they're like, wow. You know, they get a taste of the reality part. And that's exactly what I try to do with it. So, hopefully the fan part, putting it together, understanding it, and then working together, and then changing it from just solely this is a manufacturing lesson to how can you carry this with you through all the careers. That's ultimately my goal for this. So, sorry for very long-winded.
No, anything else for Adam? Let's give Adam a round of applause. So, work in your breaks. If you guys want to jump up and go use the restroom or do anything like that, help yourself. We're going to keep rolling on. Mark's going to go next. And I know we originally had said 12 o'clock. If you have any commitments for after 12 o'clock, or if you need to go, just let us know. Mark's got to get back. He's at a substitute covering. But before you go, I want to get a picture of everybody. And meet you.
I want to. Yeah, I know.
That's fine. Yeah,
I'm sorry, normally I have a.
Okay,
on this side.
So for my project, first of all, people have gone before me. You guys have all done good. You put the pressure on us. Everybody has come up and presented some pretty awesome lessons. So I kind of took literally the 5 to 10 minute presentation. So mine isn't quite as impressive as the other. It's good, but it was. And I'm going to use the same excuse Adam did. I had some situations in my family that occurred, and my dad passed, and so my time that I've spent over the last couple of weeks on this has been fairly limited because it's been a pretty difficult time for me and my family. So my teacher workplace project, when I thought about what do I want to do for my project-based lesson, I really wanted to try to infuse my students into the manufacturing sector somehow. I teach computer-aided drafting and design, and so I have some access to some equipment that can really parallel what really happens in the world of design. I can't remember which presentation it was that talked about manufacturing, and we take for granted the comfort that we have every day, and what it really takes to have those comforts. And so I wanted to try to get my kids into that world and see, it's not just, we go to this store and buy it. By taking the kids out into that workplace, allow them to see what it really takes to bring that product, to those shelves. And so through my visit to not only Accutech, but some other, I take students on some field trips, and there seems to be a reoccurring theme in manufacturing. And one of the challenges manufacturing has is a lot of times, to make a part, how do I hold that part? And that's kind of what I came to, because I wanted to make my students design something. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go to design something, I'm going to go to design something that will allow us to hold that part, whether it be in a machine, or the theme of mine is for taking critical measurements on that part, using what's called a CMM. It's a device that measures to see that part meets the quality that the customer is going to expect from that part. So that's what I have in my introduction there. This activity to introduce students to careers, duties, and responsibilities, and day-to-day processes found in the quality control department in typical manufacturing environment. And then I give you some outlook, some career outlook percentages, which aren't great in some of the areas of design engineering, maybe a slight increase. Quality control technicians, I actually found a slight decrease. And part of it's because when we visited Accutech, a lot of that quality control stuff now is done in the work cells that they've developed, and so they're limiting some of the demand on that in those departments. And so I would guess that's probably why some of that has come down. And probably another reason why some of that has come down is manufacturing equipment is so much better today than it was some time ago, that it's easier to meet those critical measurements. And so the need for some of these technicians has probably gone down. That's just a guess on my part. Rachel could probably speak better on that than me. But so I threw a little bit of that in there just to give the kids an idea of those careers and the importance of those careers. And then I talk a little bit about what I just spoke with you guys about there. So that's kind of the deal. Students will design a fixture that will be used to effectively hold a part, so critical measurements can be extracted using a CMM. And so that was the goal of my project. My project is going to require 2 activities. I have reached out to Accutech, and I'm pretty sure they're going to work with me on it. If they don't, I would reach out to some other people, because it's an imposition on you guys. I'm imposing on them guys. There's valuable people that they have in their facilities that it's difficult to take the time to And I certainly understand that. I really certainly understand it. If I can't work with a manufacturing facility, I'll try to somehow simulate it in my classroom, set up a kind of a little makeshift CMM just so they can understand the concept of what we're trying to do there. But I really want to make it real world for them. I want to make it real world for them where they're taking a part that they know is really being made, that really needs to be measured, and they're actually going to try to create a fixture that will allow that to happen. So it's a real world activity, and they'll be able to see what it really takes to have that occur. So this activity will require 2 field trips. And so that's, mine's going to be extended time. It's more than just a one-day lesson. Those were the standards that I found, and there were many more. There were many more that you could fit in there, but those were the main ones that I put into my lesson. Some of my objectives: students will be able to describe the basic duties and responsibilities design engineers and quality control technicians will have to do. Students will understand the basic function of CMM. I don't even completely understand the CMM. It's not my expertise. But I'm going to have a YouTube video that will kind of introduce the CMM so at least understand that concept, and then when we go out into the workplace, that will certainly be reinforced. Students gain a basic understanding of geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. Is the way that really all parts are going to be measured, and it's going to determine whether that part is a good part or bad part. And again, it's a pretty advanced concept, and I want the kids to understand the tip of the iceberg there. This is a whole mindset within itself that is quite in depth. Students will build communication skills, not only with each other. With this project, they're going to work in groups of 2 or 3. When they're designing their fixture, they're going to work in groups of 2 or 3. So they're going to have to learn to communicate that way, as well as when we're out in the workplace. They're going to have to learn how to communicate with professionals. And so I think that'll be a good experience for them. I think everybody in here, everybody that's in this program, by going out and visiting, whether it be a manufacturing facility or when we collaborated the other day, a couple of weeks ago, even the medical groups talked about the importance of communication. When we were talking about our experience in the workplace. So those communication skills, students will understand the importance of teamwork and develop an understanding of the importance of time management. So that's kind of some of the goals that I have. For my lesson, for my students in my lesson. Materials will need access to a CMM, so that's the importance of the connection between us and the manufacturing sector. I'll pose the question, what is GD&T, and have some class discussion on that. What do engineers do? And my kids have somewhat of a background, of understanding on that, but we'll continue to build on that. And then the place where they probably don't really realize what's happening is in that quality control area, and that's kind of why I picked on that. And then, like I said, I have a YouTube video that I'm going to use to kind of introduce that. And then some expectations for what they're going to do out in the workplace. And then as far as the activity itself, so we'll complete that introduction activities, and then we'll go on our first field trip to, whether it be which I hope it's Tech, but wherever we may end up, and that may change year to year, just so I'm not imposing all the time on the same facility, and it'll give the kids a look at some other institutes as well. So when we get out into the workplace, I'm envisioning maybe a short tour of the workplace so that they can kind of see manufacturing at work. Tech would be a great place to take the kids to. Many people have alluded already in our presentation today. I was so impressed when we went there, with the organization of the company, the the leadership, you know, when we had our first meeting, the leadership that you had there, and the importance of the employees at every level throughout the manufacturing process was evident. The cleanliness and the organization was just so impressive, and so I think opening the students' eyes to that is going to be an important part of that trip out there. And then in talking with Accutech, he would like to, is it Mike? Mike was the guy who was emailing back and forth with. Want to talk to him a little bit about the principles of the CMM and constraining apart, holding apart and limiting, the 6 degrees of freedom as far as the way that thing can be manipulated. How are we going to limit that so that those measurements can be extracted from that part? And then he would go through a setup procedure with the kids, what it takes to set that part up on that machine, and then talk about the actual fixture itself. And what I wanted to do, and I hope this can happen, my plans on doing this project probably isn't going to be till more like the springtime, because that's when I have the class that I want to do it with. We run a block schedule, so we have kids half a year, and then a whole new set of kids the second half of the year. So the class I want to do this project with is in the springtime. I forgot where I was at there. I wanted to use a real part that they manufacture. I know that can be, Mike kind of indicated that might be a little bit of a problem just because of the privacy type things, and I said, well, maybe we could use maybe even something that's been discontinued or something like that. I just want it to be something that they understand that is really being made, and these are real challenges that your company faces, and how are we gonna accomplish that inset goal. So that was kind of the idea there. And then, so we'll introduce the students to that design challenge at that point. And then I want the part to be fairly simple, so that it doesn't take up a huge amount of time. And it's something that they can accomplish. Their experience at this point is pretty limited. And then any necessary drawings that they might need would be provided as well. And then the students will use an extended amount of time back in our school to design that fixture. And this is where we have 3-dimensional modeling software. We use Inventors, it's produced by Autodesk, to design a multiple part or a single part fixture that will hold that product, so that they could extract those measurements from that. And then we would create an STL file of that part and actually produce the fixture using our 3D printer. So they're kind of taking and bringing in and I think that happens in the real world of manufacturing. I think they use 3D printing. I know when I went up to your second facility up in Sagertown, I talked to a young lady there that was one of the projects she was working on was creating a part, and she was 3D printing that fixture. Whether it was just a prototype of the fixture would actually be made to measure that part or not, I'm not sure. But that was my idea, is to use the 3D printing to bring that to life. And because the setup to actually extract those measurements from a part on a CMM is fairly lengthy, what we would do is the students would work in their teams, and we would end up with 4 or 5 different fixtures that are going to hold the same part. And as a class, we'll pick which group we think was most effective, and then we would just take one fixture to Accutech as a group and see if it worked. Because it's not going to be feasible to take 6 different ones and try 6 different ones there. Time just won't allow that, and I wouldn't expect that. And so that's kind of the idea. So it kind of actually becomes a competition within the classroom, and then we'll I haven't exactly figured out how we'll narrow it down to which one we think is gonna, or which one we feel has the most effective solution to the challenge. But we'll narrow that down and come up with one fixture that we're going to take and actually see in action out in AccuTech. And I think that will be really neat for the students, getting them out there and seeing what they did and see if it was effective or not, and then go back and talk to the kids about, okay, we missed the mark here. You know, what would you do to make it better? And that happens in the real world. Every time they design a fixture to hold apart, I'm sure it doesn't work. I was with Phil, and he was working on a part, and his fixture was a little different because it was in one of the machines that they were using to actually manufacture a part, but the same concept. Concept is the same. And Phil worked for 2 months. He was telling me he worked for 2 months to finally be able to hold this part so that they could make it, and it meets the critical tolerances that they needed that part to meet. And it was kind of funny because the day we were there was the first day they were running that part. I don't know if you know what part it was, but it was a fairly complicated part. And I said, oh man, our time is kind of bad. You probably like to be there seeing that thing works. He's like, I'm ready to step away from that thing. I'm just happy it's running. So I think he was happy to get away from it. So, but you know, so it brings it into real world. You know, the kids brings them into a real world environment and what's really happening, because it doesn't always work the first time. And so, you know, they're gonna certainly understand that. And then you meet with professionals, discuss the experience, and then have maybe a short question and answer session with the people that were involved through AccuTech in this activity. And that would be it. And then the assessment, my assessment would be a visual assessment throughout the activity. Does the group successfully solve the problem? Each group successfully solve the problem. And then I have there take just one part to be tested, and the students will complete a set of working. They'll have to have working drawings to go along with their final design, as well as their final 3D print of their final design. So that will all be part of the assessment. And then students will complete thank you letters that would be mailed out to all parties that would be involved. And so that is kind of briefly what my project would entail. Like I said, I really wanted to try to bring, you know, real world design into this activity. And so I tried to as I went on visit AccuTech, I tried to pick out, you know, think about something that happens every day. It's everyday life for them, and put that challenge in the laps of my students. So, so that's it. Questions?
Questions, comments for Mark? Mark, what's CMM?
It's a computer measuring device that CMM is computer measuring machine is what CMM is, and it's a device that when you're holding a part, it actually is just touching critical points on that part and comparing it to other points. You know, are the two sides of the part exactly parallel with each other, or is a hole round, or is a hole center? Is the center of the hole where it actually needs to be in reference to other areas of the part? And so it's an accurate measuring device to see that part's meeting the tolerances that the end customer expects it to meet.
So you're creating, because I've spent some time there too, and they 3D print that part with like magnets in there, right? And then
there's probably a lot of different ways you can hold the part. I mean, if the part presents the challenge itself, some parts you don't need any fixtures at all. Some parts you can just set on the bed of the CMM, it's all based on data planes that are all perfectly perpendicular to each other, and then everything is referenced from those 3 different data planes. So, kind of the idea. So depending on, if you have a part that's not flat and it can't sit there, you know, on the table, then how are we going to hold it so that we can extract those? I can't set something that, you know, if you set it on the table and it flops over, you can't use the CMM to measure that part, so how are you gonna hold that? But yeah, hold it in a way that we can get the CMM to where we need to get it to. So that's the challenge.
Anything else for Mark?
Good?
All right, let's give another round of applause. Good job, Mark. We have Miss Cody Patton up next. Feedback, Mark. Feedback card.
This is it. Oh. Okay.
I just put a couple of copies on each table. There's a lot. I attached all the materials for my lesson with it, so there's like that. Thanks.
So finally, let's move away from manufacturing into some healthcare, right, ladies?
Hi, I am Cody Patton. I teach 6th grade math at Fort LaBeouf Middle School. And I visited Meadville Medical Center for my on-site experience and based my activity off of that. Mine is a one-day activity, but it's going to be an all-day. We're going to adjust the schedule. It'll be May 8th, so I talked to our guidance counselor and principal and have the schedule and made for it. The morning session will be for 3 hours, it says, and that will be composed of speakers coming and talking to the kids about their jobs. So Heather, I may be contacting you to see if we can get some people from Meadville Medical Center, but I have a few people lined up already that are spouses of teachers in our district or parents of students in our district. They're in medical careers that are related to my activity. The afternoon session, the activity that I made for my lesson involves students being pharmacists. So I'm going to be looking for somebody to speak as a pharmacist. And also there will be technicians. So I tried to get different levels of education, not all jobs that you'd have to take 8 years of school to be, to show them that you could have all different levels of education and have the presenters talk about that. So one of the jobs in the activity is kids will be medical technicians. So they will be lab technicians and also MRI technicians throughout the activity. Mine is similar to what someone else said. Theirs was kind of a race between teams to manufacture something. Mine is kind of a race or competition between teams, and they each work for different hospitals. So at the back of the packet, you'll see their little, I just put a couple examples of the name badges. So they'll work for either Hammond, Meadville Medical Center. So I've had 4 different local hospitals, and then they'll each have a job at that hospital, and I'll put their picture and their name on their ID badge that they'll wear. So they're competing, the 4 hospitals, among each other to get the best patient rating and to do the best job on the soft skills rubric. So we'll start the activity by going over this patient survey. The other 2 jobs that are involved are a nurse and a physician. So there'll be one of those 4 jobs in the activity. And they have to work together as a team to get through the whole process of identifying what's wrong with the patient, treating the patient, and communicating with the patient. So we'll start by going over this rubric. So after they've heard all morning, they'll rotate around in stations. So I have the schedule in here as well. So in the morning, they'll each be assigned to a teacher. There's 6 groups. They rotate around, and for 32 minutes, they hear from each of the speakers about what's involved in that job and what kind of education is involved. And then if they have anything hands-on they can do with the kids to hold their attention, I'll ask them to do that as well. And then in the afternoon, each content area teacher, science, social studies, ELA, and math, is going to have an activity, and I've provided them just with kind of pre-made activities that I found online. So the social studies teacher is going to do a little thing with history of medicine through the Civil War. They're all going to do something medically related in their classes. And then I'm going to select a group of students to stay with me for that whole time and do the activity that I designed. So since this is the first time trying it, I'm mainly trying to get some higher level students that there's a lot of reading involved in it and following directions. So see how it goes and try to work out the kinks with them, and then maybe for future years have more kids involved in it. So the bulk of this is explaining how the different areas of the room would be set up. So it's all going to be in one big room for the activity. They'll each have a patient, so between hopefully someone from the IU being able to come, and then I have 3 people from the school that said they could be adult patients during the activity. We'll go over the rubric and talk about how to interact with the patient, what each of these soft skills, their role in their job at the hospital. So they're being ranked. I know that Heather mentioned the funding for the hospital comes through patient surveys, so I'm going to talk to them about that and the importance of doing well in this rubric, and if their hospital was failing, that they could lose their jobs over that. So the importance of time management. So sometimes I have kids who don't see the problem with them taking 3 days to take a math test that was supposed to take 1 period, and so pointing out how in real life that would be an issue. So getting their tasks done in a timely manner, using their time efficiently, being on task. And the patients are going to have this rubric and be instructed to look for them, how well they're doing at these things. Professionalism, so they have little instruction cards. So after the lesson, you see little, most of them have between 5 and 10 steps for their job that they have to read ahead of time. So I'll give them 10 minutes to read the steps of what they're supposed to do and how in their role they should be interacting professionally with the patient. So they'll be ranked on their attitude, respect, behavior. So for example, the physician, there's a sink in the room, so it says wash your hands with warm water and soap, then smile and greet the patient, tell them your name, ask them how they're feeling today. So they read that ahead of time to kind of see what that means. And I'll talk to them ahead of time, go over the expectations and say, what do you think that means? How are you professional in a hospital setting? What would be examples of not being professional in a hospital setting? So what kind of things do you think you would lose points for on the rubric if the patient saw you doing this in a job? How they communicate with each other and with the patient, the quality of their work. So if the standards in the beginning that are given here, I have the CEW standards first. It also involves math, reading for science. There's science involved in the lab technician job, and also ELA. There's inferences they have to draw to be able to diagnose the patient and correctly treat the patient. There's also some higher level math involved with the pharmacist, so I'm going to ask them ahead of time what they think they would be lean toward and try to put them in a job that they think they would enjoy. But also, I know that being their math teacher, I know their math skills, so I would put kids that I think are going to be successful in each position. So I wouldn't put a student that I think is going to have trouble with the math in the pharmacist position. So the last thing I want is for them to be frustrated by it and drive them away from wanting to get into the field. They're also, so quality of work would include their math being correct, so they have to do the calculations to see how much medicine the patient needs. In the pharmacist, it'll be, they'll be counting out how many Skittles to put in, so they have to communicate with each other to get there. So the most important job of the lab technician, it starts with them. While the lab technician does the first part, the other roles are kind of reading over theirs and preparing for their roles. It starts with the lab technician. I ordered, they're called centrifuge tubes, the tubes that when they take your blood, they put the blood samples in. And I got a pH testing kit, so they'll all just be water with red food coloring, but one of them will have a higher pH than the other, so it'll have sodium hydroxide in it, which is a clear liquid, so they won't be able to tell the difference by looking at it. They'll have to do follow the steps of the pH testing kit to find out which patient needs treated. And then while they're doing the testing of that, the nurse is going over the questionnaire with the patient about their symptoms. So that is in the packet that I gave you, the questionnaire that they will fill out. So this questionnaire form, they just go through and ask for their name, date of birth, all the information, and check off the symptoms that the patient says they're having. I'll have a little HIPAA form. They have the patient sign the HIPAA form because one of the CW standards was knowing the laws and legal responsibilities. Then they will sign off on that and submit it to the doctor. The doctor will be reading over their role. The doctor looks at this information, and then the doctor will have a visual of 2 different possible conditions that it's already narrowed down to. So the doctor will be using these visuals to inference to see what's wrong with the patient. They'll break it down between either being acidosis or alkalosis. So those are two conditions that have to do with pH in your blood. So based off what the lab technician tells them is the pH of the one that's different than all the other patients, they will have to determine whether it's alkalosis or acidosis. And then they fill out the diagnosis card. So that's one of the other materials in here is the diagnosis card. So they give that to me. So it says submit your diagnosis card to hospital supervisor Patton. And they have to give a rationale as to why they're saying it's that. So they can't just guess or I won't accept it. So I'll talk to them about, and it says in their cards too, remember this is someone's life you're dealing with. It's not a guessing game. So you have to write out a justification as to why it's one or the other. So they have to work together with the lab technician to decide which one it is. And then it'll also have a list of symptoms for each one. So that should be correct, but there's always mistakes that could happen in a lab. So they also have to use the checklist that the nurse filled out to make sure the symptoms that the nurse gathered from the patient match. And then I'll ask the patient on their card, it says feel free to kind of add, like one of the symptoms that they're supposed to exhibit is nausea, so they can act nauseous and kind of play along in the role. And then the nurse also has to gather, so for me, hopefully there will be one of the kits available. If not, I can make like a fake one because they're not really going to be using them. There's just going to be a thermometer, blood pressure, cuff, and the stethoscope in the office, and they just have to go through and check off whether each of their temperature, blood pressure, heart rate is normal or abnormal. So they're just going to have little happy and sad face stickers, so they don't have to actually take those things. They just go through and check, and it'll explain on their card if there's a happy face, check off that that's normal. So they just have to note if their temperature, blood pressure, and heart rate are normal based off of that, and sign off on it. So once they communicate with each other, the lab technician, nurse, and doctor, to determine which of those two it is, they submit the diagnosis card and justification to me, and then I give them further information because there's two different types. So they should determine that it's alkalosis, and then there's metabolic and respiratory alkalosis, so they have to further, it says they can do further testing, so they have a little testing card they can fill out. So now the lab technicians become MRI technicians, and I got this human body torso that sits on a table, and I had fun yesterday on my prep. A teacher came in and I had it like all taken apart all over the floor, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, trying to reconstruct the human body because I got it, it was all wrapped up, and as soon as I took it out of the box, the organs just all went everywhere. I was like, oh, this would be fun. So while they all have something to be doing while it's not their turn to be dealing with the patient, they all have something to do. So after they submit the blood test, it says go to, now you're an MRI tech, and two students are kind of working together. So one can be reading the directions, the other one doing, so they can help each other. So there will be 32 kids altogether, 4 hospitals, and then 4 jobs, and then 2 kids in each job working together to do it. So the same thing with it'll say study the organs, practice taking them all out, putting them back in, make sure you know where they are, because for the purpose of efficiency, they need to be able to find those organs quickly. So the doctor can now, once they now have the symptom list of metabolic versus respiratory, and it sounds complicated, but I'm going to make it pretty simple. So they have to use inferencing to tell, they get to ask the patient 3 questions. So then they go in and talk to the patient, and they can ask them 3 questions. So they would use inferencing to say, well, I don't want to ask them if they have dizziness, because that's a symptom of both. That's not going to narrow it down. So they have to look for the ones that are symptoms of just one or the other and ask the patient that. And then they'll take the information they gather from the patient from those 3 questions that they're allowed. And then they can also order 2 tests. So it says they get one of these lab report cards to give to the MRI technician, and they can have 2 organs tested. So again, they have to look at the symptoms to see which organs would be. So if it says, with respiratory, they have issues with their lungs, so they want to know what the patient's lungs look like. So they would submit the lab order. The MRI technicians would look and find the lungs and see if it has a happy or sad face sticker, and they just fill out if the lungs are normal or abnormal. So once they get the information from the patient and the test that they submit to the technicians, then they take that information and fill out a secondary diagnosis card that says this is the more specific diagnosis, and they give that to me. And then part of the nurse's job on the questionnaire form is weighing the patient, so I'm just going to tell them to call me over, and I'll just have them weigh me for each one so it's all consistent, so I can easily check the math so they all have the same answer. And then the nurse it says on their card, to give the questionnaire form to the doctor, but give the patient's weight to the pharmacy. So the nurse then goes to the pharmacy and tells them the weight. The nurse or the pharmacist has to figure out how many Skittles to put in the pill bottle. They also have to convert, they're given a conversion on their card between pounds and kilograms. So the nurse will weigh the patient in pounds, but for the medication, they have to change it to kilograms to figure out how many Skittles to put in. And then the pharmacist during the whole time is reading their information card, planning out how they're going to do the math. And then they also have a nebulator, so it ends up being respiratory alkalosis is the correct diagnosis. So I got a nebulizer machine, which is it's like an inhaler, but they wear a mask that they put on their face over it, and it turns liquid medication into vapor so they can inhale it. So they have little plastic syringes where they drop the liquid into. They have to calculate, also based off the weight, how many cc's of that to put into the nebulizer, and then so they're this whole time going to be figuring out how to use the nebulizer machine so they can train the patient on it. So it has instructions on how to use it. They'll be playing with that and figuring out how it's used, so that when it comes time for their turn, they already know how to do it and can get the patient through quickly. So the doctor comes to me and when they tell me the diagnosis, that'll tell them what color Skittles. So I actually got little fake prescription pads, and they're going to fill out how many Skittles, and then I'll tell them what color. So once I check that their math is correct, I'll say, that's correct, you need to tell the pharmacist for the red Skittles. So they'll write on their red Skittles, so then the pharmacist can't start filling the prescription until they know the correct Skittles color, so the math has to be checked first. So they'll do that, and then, so we're going to talk about the importance of speed and accuracy. So the math being correct, but also done quickly, because we want to get the patients in and out, and they're limited on appointment times with the patients, so they're limited on questions, so they have to think ahead of time about good questions to ask, so they're not wasting the patient's time or wasting time getting more patients in. So at the end, the patients will all rate their hospital on how their care was, and then the group that gets the highest rating will get to take a scoop. There's a big bag of Skittles, so they get to take a scoop of big bag of Skittles if they were the team that won, and then we'll just talk about issues that they encountered in working with their teams, how they had to, the importance of teamwork, what issues they ran into, how it went as far as communication, and we'll just have a discussion at the end. And then the guidance counselor has a written reflection for the 339 plan. For evidence of that, she'll have them do a written reflection, and that's one of the rotations. The other kids that aren't doing my activity while they're rotating, one of their rotations is to do the written reflection with the guidance counselor also. So they're all going to be doing a written reflection on the activities they did and on their morning sessions with cueing from the guest speakers.
So you'll see every 6th grader through this all throughout the day.
I won't. With my activity, I'll only see 32 of them, because my activity, I put on here 2 hours, but I think we might take 3 hours. So I have 3 hours allotted if we need more time. But I put 2 hours, and then hopefully we'll have time to do the written reflection after. But the other kids that aren't doing the activity with me and are just rotating with the other teachers and doing like the history of medicine and things with the other teachers, they're just going to rotate in, I think it's 25-minute sessions each, and they won't see me because they'll be doing shorter activities that are not as in-depth.
Let's get going. Questions? Fire away.
Of the 32 kids, will those be ones you hand select?
Yeah, it's mostly going to be just my advanced classes for this time.
Because that's
I
could see that being overwhelming for somebody who is.
It's a lot of things going on at once, and it takes a lot of reading skills, being able to read and follow directions. So going to see how it goes with them. If it's challenging for them, then obviously I'll need to heavily adapt it if I'm going to use it for my regular classes.
That's great.
Anybody else? Questions?
It's very well thought out.
Yeah.
Very well.
Ambitious.
Pam.
Oh.
You ready?
Sure.
All right. Did you send it up?
I emailed it to myself.
Okay.
long day.
I don't know, it's not here. I don't know if it went to my spam, if it filtered it. I don't know if I can. Can Craig go first and I'll see if I can have my husband send it.
Sure. You might have had the same problem that I had, which was I tried to email from my laptop, and apparently it will only send out an email if I'm hooked up to my home base. It's in my outbox waiting to go to you, and so I don't know through, but I can have a paper copy of it.
We have copies. There might not be enough for everyone, but.
No cards for Cody? Feedback?
Excuse me.
So unfortunately, you won't be able to see up on the screen, but she is passing out some handouts. I'm Craig Beverly. I am the school counselor at Pontiac Middle School,
Correct.
which this year is what?
Kill that?
What?
You good with that, or do you want me to?
Am I okay with it? I'm not going to tell you to turn it off because I don't like it. So.
Well, I'll turn it off. You'll like it.
I'm a big boy. I have to think sometimes. So, at any rate, I chose to go to Meadville Medical Center for my experience because I've done quite a few trips to the local manufacturing companies down in the Meadville area, and they're all amazing. So I decided to, I've got that kind of experience covered. I decided to branch out. I have two sons that are both in the medical field. One's a pharmacist and one's a physical therapist. So I decided that I would do the medical avenue and maybe get some of their help if I needed. So I'd have some people to fall back on. Heather had, I think, 16 different departments at the Medical Center present to us, which was amazing. And I think that was less than half of the departments you have there.
Oh.
So it's like overwhelming what all goes on in a hospital. We're all familiar with doctors and nurses and all that stuff. But I was really interested in some of the things that you don't always associate with the hospital. So the activity that I've come up with kind of incorporates the lesser known aspects of a hospital setting in the medical field. So to start with, on day one, it's a 2-day activity. Day one, they're going to get the medical conditions sheet, which looks like this, with all these lines that they have to complete. And they're going to be able to work in groups of 2 to 4, however they want to divide up. I think the more students they have, the easier the project will be, but some kids like to work with just one person or whatever. And so, you know, however their teamwork goes, they can figure that out. I did think of having like a prize awarded to the group that does the best job, not the fastest job, but the best job with answering the questions accurately and completely. So I picked 3 different medical health conditions: type 2 diabetes, traumatic brain injury, and alcohol abuse. And I picked those 3 specifically because predominantly those are related to choices that people make. They don't just happen or you're born with them. It's something you've chosen to do or not do that could lead to these kind of conditions. And I want to point that out to the kids after we go through this lesson, but I pointed out to you that there was a reason why I picked those 3. So hopefully as they go through this, they'll realize some of the decisions they make on a daily basis actually has an impact on their life, not just right now, but down the road as well. And if you have a serious medical condition, that might definitely jeopardize your career opportunities. So there's a strong relationship between that. So the first thing they're going to get is a laptop or a Chromebook or something where they have to go to the websites that are listed on my lesson plan. There's one for each of the 3 conditions. They're listed in blue on your lesson plan there. They can do it in any order. If they want to divide themselves up,
hey, you take care of all the causes, you take care of all the symptoms, you take care of all the serious risks and complications, you do the treatments, and we'll combine at the end. But they're going to have to present or produce their own individual thing, even though they can work in groups. So every student will turn in one of those condition sheets. When they go to those websites, they're going to see that some of these things that are listed on this sheet don't exist, which means you can't use it, but they've got to kind of do some of that research. Some of these can be used in more than one area. Some of them can actually be used in all three, some of them can be used in two. So they're going to have to really kind of look at it carefully and not just like, okay, I got this one picked off, cross it off. They can't just cross them off because some of them, as I said, can be used in more than one area. And some of them they're going to have to really do some research because there'll be some things they're not really familiar with, they've never heard of before, especially the treatment part. And some of them are thrown in there like to be confusing. So we'll see if they really do some research or just go by their own memory and think, well, I can do this, I know all these things, and I can do this without having to research. The prizes, I was thinking, we probably wouldn't get out until day 2. So this would be day 1, identifying all these different characteristics or thoughts, ideas, and they have to put them correctly into these. And not every line will be used. Some of them, there's not enough lines. So if they want to add lines, they can, and I'll point that out to them. But the idea will be do the research as you go through this and talk to each other and figure out which ones go where, which ones don't. And hopefully they'll see that some of their choices and that they make in their own daily lives actually have a serious impact on what's going on. So day 2, after I've had a chance to go through these and correctly identify who's the winning group, and if there's a tie, then I'll go by time, who got done first, but I don't think that'll be an issue. I'm going to have an option of either like a bag of carrot sticks and celery sticks and some healthy things, and a bag of maybe Hershey's Kisses or some kind of chocolate thing. Which do you want? You know, here's another choice you have to make, and we'll see if they've actually learned a lesson or not. Because I'm guessing most of the kids, and by the way, I'm going to do this with 7th grade health students. Our kids take health once a week in 7th grade. It's a 40-minute class period. Initially, I was going to do this with our high 8th grade group during advisory, which is a 20-minute class. But there were 2 problems with that. First, it's only a 20-minute class, and so it would be hard to do all this in a 20-minute time period, and I didn't want to have to drag it out over days and days. And second, we only have one high 8th grade class group, which would mean only a small portion of our students would get it. And if I go through the health class in 7th grade, because this is medical health, it goes along with it, then all kids can benefit from it and can actually use it as part of our requirement that the state now has for, you know, the career ed component. So it will be a 2-day thing with the health class, and unfortunately it won't be back-to-back because they have it, if they have health on Monday, they'll have it every Monday. So they'll have to have a week in between. So day 2 is when we'll give out the prize and we'll see what they pick, either congratulate them or chastise them based on their choices. And then day 2, using the Career One Stop website, all kinds of videos available for all different kinds of careers. And I decided to pick 4 careers that are less commonly known. Okay. Medical laboratory technologist, occupational therapist, physician assistant, and social worker. So we'll look at all 4 of those videos and then discuss each one at the end. What was the average salary? What are the working conditions? What are the typical jobs you do? What kind of training do you have to get for that? And kind of discuss that without them having knowledge of the sheet coming. And then after that, they will get the sheet and try to see if they can identify correctly. And they can do this in groups again, but they have to submit their own answer. So if they don't agree with one of their group members, what the correct answer is, so be it. And again, this can be more than one could be correct. 2, 3, 4, just one. Most of them are just one, but there's 1 or 2 that's more than one. And then at the bottom, I put down a couple of reflection questions for them, whether they like the health industry or not. You know, what did they find most beneficial or most interesting and least interesting with this? Day 2 will probably not take as long, and on my lesson plan, I see it didn't print out. I don't know if I forgot to save it or what, but I was going to use the medical kits at the end because I don't think that will take quite 40 minutes to get through. and just give them in their groups an opportunity to kind of play around with a little bit the blood cup or the pressure cup thing and the temperature thing and the stethoscope, and they can try and do those things from resting, you know, after 10 minutes of sitting around, not really being too active, and then if they want to get up and run around or do jumping jacks or whatever to get things, you know, heightened, they can try that and kind of experiment with that. So a little bit of hands-on with that. So day one, although it is kind of career-oriented because it's talking about making decisions that affect your health and your possible ability to have a career. Day two is more of the career ed stuff where they're looking at specific jobs and what that entails and how to go about that. So I was planning on 5 minutes. I think I maybe went over a little bit. That's okay. So questions?
Great.
And one other thing, I was hoping to do a field trip with all my 7th graders to come to Midfield Medical Center and watch open heart surgery, but Heather said no, we don't want to. Very disheartened with that news. I'm going to throw you under the bus here.
Questions, comments, feedback for Craig?
I think it's great that you pick jobs that people don't necessarily always think about, you know.
And different levels of education, and the one you don't actually deal with patients, or the patients at all. It's all behind the scene. It's still medical. It's very necessary and critical. But if you can't stand I heard the blood and poop part. If you can't stand that stuff, good. You don't have to. Although I think some of the blood and poop does go to the mental.
Yeah, they do.
You never know what you might be getting yourself into, but different levels of training, anywhere from, you know, kind of coming out of high school to a doctoral degree. So it's a definite strong need, I think, across the country, definitely in Crawford County. I think it's the highest need job, basically, in Crawford County, getting people in the medical health field. And a lot of people say, no, I don't want to do that. Well, you don't really know what everything is in the medical health field. All you know is doctor and nurse and stereotypes with that. So hopefully open their eyes, and maybe as they go through this kind of, you know what, I wouldn't mind, or that's kind of interesting, or, you know, I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but that's gross, I don't want to do that. So hopefully maybe help them with a little bit of career guidance with what direction they might want to go. So, thoughts?
Other feedback, Craig? Hey, good job. Pam, you ready?
All right, I hope so.
Feedback for Craig.
Right.
I like that, Craig. Put it together.
I like that. I like not the causes, the different types are all choice driven, like TBI, type 2 diabetes, and your alcohol.
Like choices. Choice driven.
Make them think a little bit. So Ann, either this afternoon or tomorrow, you'll probably get an email from me with my lesson plan. You'll wonder, what the hell is he sending this to me now for? That's why, because it's in my outbox waiting to be reconnected, I guess.
All right, so mine is a dual purpose lesson. I teach learning support at the middle school level for 7th and 8th graders. And sadly, I have students in my class who vape. So I kind of wanted to incorporate what the effects of vaping might be and how they might affect the role of a respiratory therapist job. We had a respiratory therapist that spoke to us at Meadville Medical Center, and although there's not a great deal of research out there yet about vaping because it's a relatively new phenomenon, the respiratory therapist had some ideas or theories of what he thought may be the outcomes of vaping. The fact that vape juice is an oil-based and that your oxygen exchange takes place in the bottom of your lungs. And where's oil going to go? It's going to sink to the bottom, to the part of your lungs where oxygen exchange is supposed to take place. So if you're constantly inhaling this vape juice, eventually the theory is that your lungs will begin to fill up with that juice and then your oxygen exchange will be compromised. There are more target standards probably that I could hit with this, but the two were cooperation and teamwork and group interaction. A couple videos. The one video that I found that talked about, for my introduction, that talks about vaping was very informative. I had no idea, and due to time, I mean, I guess I could show it, but I think maybe I won't. The vape device itself heats up, and there's metal inside that device, and when the metal heats up, and kids are inhaling, they believe they're inhaling some of the burn off from those chemicals, being the metal heating up and the metal producing chemicals. They're also talking about popcorn lung that can happen with people who vape, where the air sacs in your lungs actually get killed off, die off, and then your lungs don't function appropriately. I have asthma already. I developed it as a child, and I know that vaping, another thing that they've said about vaping is that it can inflame or cause asthma to become worse. So the introduction of my lesson would be showing a video about vaping, and then using the PDE website, showing another video about the role of a respiratory therapist. I would break the kids up into 3 groups, not really tell them why I'm breaking them up into groups or what the groups are. The first group would have no exercise band around their leg. I found exercise bands that are actually looped already. So they would have no band on their leg, they would have no straw in their mouth, and no clothespin on their nose. The second group would have a mixture of the lowest resistance bands and the medium resistance bands, and then they sell straws that are for milkshakes that have a bigger diameter, and then a normal size straw, so they would have a mixture of those. And then the third group would have the highest resistant band and the stir sticks that you use for coffee, so they're going to be struggling big time. So each group would take and record their resting pulse rate, and then whatever their resistance band was that they were supposed to be using, they would loop it around their legs, they get the clothespin on their nose, they get their straw in their mouth, and then they would have stopwatches so they could time themselves, or maybe I would have a timer, and they would walk as fast as they could down the length of the hallway and back. I would have to tell them to make sure that if they weren't feeling well, that they could stop at any time, because I can only imagine having a stir stick to breathe out of, and that being the only way to get air would be very difficult. Coming back to class, we would then talk about, do you realize what do these activities illustrate? Some of them may realize, and some of them may not. The first group, in my mind, I was thinking those are kids probably who are never vaped before. The second group could simulate someone who has vaped for years, but also to show how vaping affects people differently depending on your genetics and other factors, how healthy you are to begin with before you start vaping. And then the third group would represent what it feels like to breathe with chronic lung disease. And so I picked just a couple because there were quite a few diseases that they talked about in reference to smoking, and they're linking to vaping as well. That would be chronic bronchitis and emphysema. So that third group would be the group that would be representing those people that were having very difficult time breathing. They would work in groups. I have a poster of the respiratory, it's a really, really simple poster of the respiratory system that the kids could use in order to complete their own poster. So here's the one that they would complete. And then I have another one that, actually has the parts labeled. So it'd be very simple for them to look at. It's not, it actually has more detail about the gas exchange, and these portions down here at the bottom of the screen would be the parts that would be affected if you did in fact end up with popcorn lung, which didn't sound like anything anyone would want to have. The piece of evidence that the kids would have would be to write a reflection on how they think a respiratory therapist job may change as a result of students vaping. I know when I was in school and I'm older, kids would go in the bathroom and smoke cigarettes, and that was the thing that they did. Kids these days, they'll tell you that they see those commercials about smoking cigarettes and they all realize that it's a dumb thing to do. Some of them still do it. But they're all led to believe that vaping is safe, because if you look at vapes, they look like Fruity Pebbles or, sugary cereals. And tobacco companies were actually banned from using those types of flavors to entice kids, but now tobacco companies are buying these. Vape companies are the ones who created them to begin with in some cases, and they found a whole new market, and they're allowed to, it's kind of their loophole, their way to get through it. Kids are under the misconception that it's just water vapor, and it's way more than that. Juul has the amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes, and kids are saying that they're going to the bathroom and they have to smoke because they're so addicted to nicotine that they go through a Juul, I think a juice a day. So that's a ton. And I didn't know a lot about vaping, but the more I read about it, the more sick to my stomach it makes me, because my kids don't make good decisions anyway, a lot of them, because they're, you know, the lower functioning kids, and they're easily led in the wrong direction, sadly, a lot of times. But I think if we can get the knowledge out there, hopefully before they get to high school, because that's when it really seems to be becoming an issue, that hopefully we can eliminate some of the issues that kids are gonna experience. I had thought about having a respiratory therapist come in and speak to the class. I think that would be good, and maybe bring in some of their equipment, the spirometer. I had thought about doing lung capacity tests and things, but I really wanted to keep it simple and to keep the message, you know, if you do want to become a respiratory therapist, you're probably going to have a pretty decent clientele out there, because people are doing dumb things, and, you know, unfortunately, if kids start young and they get addicted, they're likely to continue it as a lifelong habit and pass it down to their kids. So I'd just like to see if we could get a handle on it now, and hopefully stop some kids from even starting because they think it's safe and it's not.
Feedback, questions, comments? Very streamlined, man. Very clean.
Pam, I wondered, when you're gonna put the kids in groups, were you gonna target the kids to be in certain groups, or do it totally random?
There's one individual that I would make sure had the stir straw.
I think I know that
maybe
individual.
2 bands around his legs.
maybe plug his straw.
Yeah, maybe plug his straw a little bit.
So is that to simulate difficulty breathing?
Yes, exactly. For whatever reason, maybe. I know I have one student who vapes, and he started smoking now too. So I just see it as a transition, and you know, how many bad things can you put in your body before something pretty horrible happens. So.
I think that connection with potential respiratory therapists, even if it's a digital connection in some capacity, like a video.
Yeah, I have a video in there.
Yeah.
I heard my first vape commercial on the radio yesterday on XM radio, listening to some football stuff, and I'd never heard one, and it just surprised me. It was Juul, and they were marketing it, although they didn't come out and say, if you're addicted to cigarettes and you want to try and break that addiction, switch to our product, but they made it sound like this was the way to break a cigarette addiction, was a much safer thing to use.
Yeah.
They didn't use the word safer. They were very careful with the words they used, like, wow, nice marketing, making people think that this is a much safer alternative, and everything will be fine if you do this instead of cigarette smoking. I was like, they've got good marketers. I'll give them credit.
Well, we did a lesson in Scholastic Action magazine about vaping, and they showed a video, but it really wasn't. It just touched the surface. These guys need to be scared. Like, they need to know that it's bad stuff, because they feel invincible anyway. You guys all know that if you work with kids. They don't think anything bad's going to happen to them. So
it's pretty simple in the sense that it could be used at a lot of different levels. It's not learning for kids, or you could use it with students in regular classes.
thanks, guys.
Good job, Dave. What do you need from me, Dave?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Can we?
Yeah.
I'm leaving. Okay. You are not, if you're not going to fill out one of those video photo release form, you can stay out of it. If not, come on up. Rhonda, can you take a picture for us?
I would love to.
Okay. Come on up, everybody just pile up here. I'll take the tape on.
Oh, that's all right. I'm short.
Everybody running down here?
I don't want it to be short.
Get to know your neighbor.
It's always short enough.
Deb.
All right.
Here.
Here, you want some?
Hold on.
Don't worry, you step on me or whatever you want. Yeah.
All right. Oh, looking good, group. Here we go. Let me see. 1, 2, 3. Smile really big. There we go.
Awesome,
Should be a
thank
good
you.
one.
I can email that to you.
Yeah.
Email it to yourself.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
That's why everybody's running. Sorry. Like this is going to be about data analysis and stats. Get the hell out of here. Should I go or?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm David Masterson, teaching math at Fairview High School. So I'm very interested in data analysis. I wanted that to be part of this project. I wanted to gather data when I went to Brevillaire Village. And speaking of data, breakthrough discovery. See if I can get this to show properly here. You guys see that okay? That cartoon right there? Tobacco Industry Research Center. Breakthrough results. Excellent health statistics. Smokers are less likely to die of age-related illnesses. So, maybe we've got to get some of those residents to start smoking.
No, we're a non-smoking facility,
They're less likely to die of age-related. So I think you guys all see the point there. I think you see the point, and that's what part of my course is at teaching AP statistics and statistics is people are collecting data and they're trying to use data to fit their agenda, right? They want to fit their agenda. They want to twist the numbers and show the numbers so it fits their agenda. And so we have to fight that all the time and talk about, hey, this is a good thing that you're getting educated in data analysis and statistics because then you can see when the wool is being pulled over your eyes, like here. And this is obviously a joke, but there are situations where people are using statistics to say ridiculous things and there really is no relationship. Or it's a different kind of relationship. And by the way, when I went to Brevillaire Village, Vicki had a great plan for me. I saw and talked to a multitude of different departments and areas, different careers. As people said about Accutech, the facility here was clean also. Should be clean there, right? But it was. A beautiful backdrop on the lake. If you've never been to Brevillaire Village, it's a beautiful place. So thanks for having me there. You did a great job with that. But I did leave with some data. A lot of data, and I took a lot of time to input it and analyze it because the project is going to be based on data analysis. Everybody's collecting data nowadays, right? Everybody's collecting data, stealing data, right? Stealing data is a big thing, right, nowadays too. So I wanted to focus on that and show the importance of being able to analyze data, and it would fit right into my statistics classes. So I was figuring out she gave me a lot of data. What should I focus on? What would be the best thing? Well, the title of the lesson is, this is the wrong lesson. How come mine's not showing? Oh, because I have to click on the right lesson. There it is. The title of the lesson is Balls Falls. Catchy title, huh? Because they have it's called Brevillaire Village Ball Pavilion. And I decided to focus on falling data, the residents falling, right? And Vicki gave me a great stat. She said that, let me find it here. She said that when an elderly person suffers a fall where they break a hip, it reduces their life expectancy by 9 to 12 months. Okay, so just by that one fall, breaking a hip, the data shows that they are probably going to reduce their life expectancy when that happens. So I wanted to focus on the fall data. So I took a bunch of the data that she gave me. I had to mine it myself to try to figure out what the project would be with the students. So the first step of the process, step one, takes about 30 minutes. I found a cool website, the 5 best industries to find a job in data science. They're going to each pick one of those 5 careers, come back as a group, research and find 3 new facts about each career. That's the first step, just to start talking about data science. Next step, also on the Career One Stop, which some of you guys used, I found 3 other careers related to data science: survey researchers, operations research analyst, and statistician. And they're going to watch those, just 3 quick videos, kind of like setting the stage for them here, right? And then I wanted to introduce them to the real life scenario, okay? The real life scenario is that they are speaking with the Director of Operations at Breviller Village, and they're asked to analyze the residents' fall data. And their job is, specifically, they need to figure out if the staffing is correct in terms of weekends, weekdays. Is there any relationship or connections with which hall, because they have 3 different halls there, or which shift? Are there more falls at night, or first shift, second shift, third shift? So they're really going to take a look and see if they could find something interesting, find a connection, find a relationship, which could then lead to a recommendation, actually a real life recommendation to Breviller Village. So I don't know if they have somebody that's pouring over this data every day or not. Probably not. They have the data, but I don't know if they're really looking at it, how closely they're looking at it. So that's the first step. Or actually, no, that's the third step of the process, is to then, so I'm going to give them the data. I'm going to give them the raw data. Looks something like that. Of course, they can download that. And there's a lot of data here that they can look through. It falls based on shift, what shift they fell, what hall they fell, whether they fell a weekday or a weekend. So there's a lot of good data there to look at. Then that's going to be the open-ended part of it. They're going to go and they're going to analyze the data in an open-ended fashion. What can they find first? Then we're going to come back as a large group. That's the initial analysis of data. Then we're going to come back as a large group, and we're going to share the ideas they came up with. What did you guys all come up with? What did you guys come up with? And talk about what they found and where we want to focus. Because now we want to have a targeted focus. Because I honestly spent hours looking at this data trying to find relationships. We don't have that much class time. So I would give them maybe like a half an hour to kind of mine the data themselves, see what they can find. And that's about it, maybe half an hour. And then when we come back as a group, we'll start to target them. So who's ever running this lesson, I gave some ideas here. Here's some ideas on what I found and where they could tell the students to start creating charts and start targeting. All right? Then that takes us up into this area here. And I'm surprised nobody used the word artifact today. Because when I first heard that, the first session, I'm like, well, are we in ancient Egypt looking at that? But that's the first time I heard the word artifact. So 2 artifacts here that they're going to come out with. The first artifact is, okay, now they're going to get back and work for 80 to 100 minutes roughly on the targeted data analysis, which I'll go over some of the results in a minute here. And they're going to create this document, which is creating tables, creating graphs, everything they've learned in their stat class so far. Yeah, this is going to have to be statistics students. This is going to be high school stat class stuff. References to the data, conclusions, and then a recommendation to Breviller Village. That's going to be their artifact 1. And that's something that obviously they can use for the requirements from the state. Artifact 2 then is going to be going a little more career, a little more leaving the stat realm and going to the career realm. The second document, artifact 2, is to a basic business plan as to how they can make a career out of this type of data analysis. How they could change with the times and demands of the changing world and of the changing economy. So this could be a career, obviously, and be showing some videos of different careers and how they could work with different businesses, different firms, and how they could use their data analysis skills as a job, okay, whether it's working for a large company or whether it's almost freelance. There's situations like that out there also. And that'll be the second artifact. Now here I have, I'm not going to go through all the assessment here, but I have some of the specific things they should look at, like I'm looking for like a time plot, looking by trends from each month of the fall, how many fell each month.
So those are data, that's data that you found, that you want in hopes that they'll find.
Yes.
Got it.
And that's where we come back as the idea sharing session. To, if they haven't found these connections, I will start to give them the hints to target where they need to find. We can't take, tons of time on it. Here's some of the stuff, just looking at some of the stuff that I did here, some of the information. Took a while to input it. I was going to email you and say, do you have this in a digital format? But I said, I'll just input it. So I found a lot of different things here. And you have to use a software package too, I would recommend. Excel doesn't have everything you need, so I definitely use the software package.
What do your kids use in their classes?
We have a software package called StatCrunch.
StatCrunch
is called. It's an online, it's just a website.
Okay.
It's great. Costs $5 a kid for the year. So our school pays for that. So anyhow, I'm going to be looking, the assessment would be to look that they created the correct tables, the correct graphs, the correct tests, their interpretations, and final conclusion, and that is how we're going to assess that. And the assessment on the artifact number 2 is, it's also listed there on what I'm going to be looking for artifact 2, that they cover their basic business plan and how they would change with the future. And to finish off here, here's some of the things I found, just in case it interested you. No significant difference in the falls between shifts. No significant relationship detected between the shift and the halls. The number of falls significantly are significantly up in the summer months, especially July and August, and the time plot showed that. Significantly more falls in Hall A versus Hall C, and Vicki said that makes sense to her. And I think the biggest one was there was a significantly higher fall rate on the weekends versus the weekdays, and the students have to do a quick math calculation to make that a fair comparison, because there's 5 weekdays and 2 weekend days, and so they have to do a quick simple multiplication to have a fair, equitable comparison. And so I give some information there. Fall rate on a weekday is 0.55 falls per day. On the weekend, 0.8 falls per day, and that turns out to be significant. Okay. And so then that leads them into saying, look questions about their staffing on the weekends and the summer versus weekdays, in case there's an issue there. And I told Vicki she may know all this stuff, but give the students a feeling of, hey, I'm actually solving a real life problem, because it's real data. And one other thing, we may have the students visit and continue to do it on a yearly basis and collect more data, because the data is going to change, and they can see if the data has changed over the years. All right, so there we go.
Feedback, questions? Vicki, do you have anybody at your institution that does this?
We have somebody that looks at the fall data on a monthly basis. But, and we do try to do, we just don't have time to do it in these lovely.
Certainly.
Plus, I think it's going to be exciting to them, to staff to say, okay, we independently sent this data out, this is what they came back with, instead of us always saying it all the time.
Yeah.
That was the nice benefit, was we were really going to actually get something back that was usable for 2018 data. I mean, people just don't realize how much data is collected in healthcare. I mean, and how you use it every day. When Dave showed me the July and August, I said, well, that makes perfect sense to me, because July and August is our busiest vacation time, and I have nurses switching units because we have to cover vacation. So you're putting a nurse on a unit that she doesn't know those residents as well as the nurse who works there every day. So that makes a lot of sense to me, that there's a nurse there that may only work there like for a week while somebody's on vacation and doesn't know those 20-some people the way the regular nurse knows them. So, I mean, a lot of good information we can take back for sure and use, so I'm thrilled.
Yeah, questions, comments for Dave?
I'm not a stats guy, but I like that.
I was just
I
gonna
struggle with
say-
stats, but that was really good.
Yeah, stats don't really interest me, but now it's kind of sparked my interest.
Oh my God, so you just don't realize in healthcare how much you rely on statistics and data. That's how we're reimbursed, is all on data that we send to the state and the federal government, and they analyze it, and then they give you money based on all of your data.
Would the results of this jeopardize your income then?
Oh, no,
If it's- well, you've got way too many falls and you're not, whatever.
No.
No?
I've submitted this to the state, by the way.
The state's not gonna know about this, right?
And we go even beyond that to look at specific residents. Like our report goes into detail about who are what we call our frequent fallers, the ones who fall, from month to month, all the time. And we have to develop a different care planning system. We have to look at how can we prevent them from falling. Because when you think about someone who falls and breaks a hip, 80% of those people will be dead within a year. Statistically, it just changes their whole life pattern.
So they should smoke, right?
Yeah. So preventing those hip fractures is important because what happens is they get more complacent, they stay in bed more, they're not as mobile as they used to be, they get pneumonias, they get things that they can't recover from because they're 85, 90, 100 years old. So it may not sound like a big deal, but it's a huge deal for us. It's a huge
And she
deal
gave me
for
data
us.
on other
Oh,
facilities
God.
too, and Revelair was below average
Oh,
in terms
yeah.
of fall rate. So I didn't want to make it sound like they had an issue there. They were actually, because you gave me all the data from 9 facilities, and it was nice to compare them. That didn't make the cut, but
Yeah.
How many patients do you have?
We have in our skilled facility, bulk pavilion, we have 85.
Because those numbers could be skewed by having a certain few people that are at higher fall risk or,
Oh, and that,
just depending on your population at the
when
time.
Dave said A had more falls than C, well, during those months that they were high, A Hall had a lot of behavior, a lot of our dementia residents who have no awareness of safety.
Right.
They just stand up and they'll fall. And if you can't be there to get them,
Yeah.
so it made a lot of sense to me that A would have more because C had more of our hospice residents during those months, and they're not tending to get up and move. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
thank you.
You guys ready to roll here?
Drew, are you
done.
ready?
Save the best for
This is
last.
going to be nice and sweet. All right, so I'm Drew. I work at Fairview as the engineering design educator. We're all familiar with the goals that we had for, this, just trying to look at how do we create some project-based learning for students to get interested in these fields. So I had the privilege of taking a tour of Accutech. They had 2 different facilities that I got to take a look through. Both had very similar requirements for what they are looking for employees. And a lot of it really came down to procedures. How do we create procedures that we can take this raw material, create something out of it with a very, very specific tolerance? Because they do all of their work mostly within the aircraft industry. Things need to be a different set of tolerancing there. So, problem solving, measurement, a lot of these things were something that were very apparent in a lot of these jobs. And ultimately, as we've seen kind of across the board, expertise comes with effort and practice, regardless of what field we're talking about. If you put forth that effort and you continue to come and do the same thing, you will see improvements and you can advance yourself throughout the industry. So, for this lesson plan, which I'll show you in a little bit, basically we are going to do something very similar to what Mark had talked about. We will create a fixture that will be able to hold a part. We will perform some operations on that part.
using some actual manufacturing principles, which include milling or turning or boring. Those are the three main operations you can do as a manufacturer. So, I'll pop open the worksheet here. So this worksheet is basically what allows us to bring all these things together. We'll form some groups, okay? And this lesson was designed kind of in the spirit of some of the other IU push-in lessons, where this could be really any age group in high school, I would say, and it could also really take place in any sort of environment. This doesn't have to be just in a technology classroom. So we essentially find some different roles, and then we're going to ask the students to construct a custom part. So we would give them an engineering drawing that would look something like this. They would be expected to cut out of a foam block one of these parts, and we would give them all of the dimensions that they would need. So they would have a certain amount of time. They use the tools that we have for them. They create this custom block. So they might have to make a couple cuts there to knock that corner out. They'll make a couple cuts there for that little U shape, and then finally put a couple holes in it. And they would ultimately time themselves and record it into the operations and the time that they had put into that as well. Now, on the engineering drawings, there are specific measurements that have to be fulfilled in order for this to be a legitimate part. So they would look at things like the length, the width, the thickness, or the height of specific places on that part and calculate the tolerance that they actually achieved through those procedures. All right, so if they make a cut on something, it's supposed to be ½ inch thick, and it's maybe 0.51 inches. So they are now plus 0.01 inches over the expected measurement there. So certain of those measurements could be considered within tolerance that can pass, or other ones you might need to recheck that operation. So the students, one of the students who is the procedures would be writing down what order did we do these operations. Did we cut first and then drill, or did we drill the holes and then cut those parts? Once they go through that, through the custom part one time, they take a look at their procedure and they say, all right, what can we change? How can we make this more efficient? Now is the time where they create the fixture. Part of the requirement for this, which is detailed in the lesson plan, they would need to create 2 fixtures or 2 methods of holding that part throughout the overall procedure. So once they decide on what order they would like to do the operations in, they begin to create these fixtures. And they would have different tools, some larger blocks that have some holes drilled in them. I actually have some students that are very enthusiastic about creating these kits. So this will be kind of a fun process for these seniors to work on this stuff. But essentially, there will be tools already made that allow them to hold these foam blocks. They just have to figure out in what orientation they want to do this stuff. So once they figure out their fixture and they're confident in how they can hold this part, now we will go through what would be called a batch process of manufacturing. So once again, we're just recording times. How long does it take us to move through each of these steps in the operation? And then after they're done, how close are those operations to the actual measurements that we were expected to have at this point? So once again, after we complete that, we record those, we have our procedures. Now we get into a little bit of analysis at the very end of this project. We compare the average time for the batch parts versus the custom part, which probably they should see that the batch parts were a little more timely. It was easier to get through those operations. And then we will create a success percentage. How many of the parts that we created were actually within tolerance all the way through. And then we can compare that among the class. Once we see who had some very successful operations, we could take a look at why it may have been that way. Did they create their fixture in a certain way? Did they choose their operations in a specific order that allowed them to succeed in that way? It's not necessarily about speed, it's more about precision. And that's where the precision manufacturing comes in places like Accutech. It's really about really holding on to those tolerances. So once they're done, we can then reflect either within our group or as an entire group, how did these things play out? What would we do differently in the future? Maybe what were some successful elements of our procedure? So this was roughly, for a 80-minute class period. That's about where we are at Fairview for 1 period a day. However, this could definitely be expanded into an entire unit on manufacturing. If it were in a technology classroom. I believe we're looking at designing a manufacturing engineering class for 8th to 9th graders within our district. So this could definitely be a unit where we look at how do you use calipers, what is the best way to measure things, all of these additional skills that would enhance this, but you might not necessarily need to have them to participate in this. It could open up doors like, I really don't understand measurement very well. Maybe I should look at that a little bit more, ask some more questions to my instructor. So that's kind of where it is. Keeping it hands-on, but applicable to real-world scenarios.
Cool. In terms of Accutech, what was their tolerance? Well, on
they call it a thou, which is 10/1000ths of an inch, which is a very, very, your hair follicle is, I think, 5/10,000ths of an inch, so about 1/5 of the thickness of your hair are some of the tolerances that they have to work with. Now for us, depending on the process, we had talked about using a foam cutter rather than a saw or something like that. Depending on what tools are used, those tolerances are going to be very, very different for this project.
Yeah, I think that you had showed what kind of materials and supplies are you going to need essentially to do that?
So I imagine a plywood baseboard with holes drilled in it, and then little wooden blocks with a threaded hole that you could screw a bolt into. So that block could be placed on the baseboard, and you could screw that screw in to hold that foam block. So a lot of these things, like I said, would need to be created. I have some students that are very passionate about doing this kind of work, so I could see, some different iterations of those kits kind of being formulated around this general idea.
Questions, comments for Drew?
If you ever want to get out of the manufacturing realm, we had students, and this was a long time ago, over 20, 25 years ago, who were engineering students who came in and made, some of our residents are capable of sitting up straight. They need props or devices to help them while they're sitting in wheelchairs, or when they're laying in a reclining wheelchair. The class came in and actually made them engineering. They actually took the measurements of the wheelchairs and made these really nice foam type of inserts.
For the chair.
For the chair, so that the residents could sit up straighter. If you're ever looking for something non-manufacturing, something like that.
We do have a STEM academy that we just started, so students can pick an individual project. That sounds like an excellent application of that.
And you had to measure every chair differently, and you had to,
Very
pretty interesting.
I just find it fascinating about how much effort goes into making something to just hold something that can be made. To get to engineer something just to hold something you're going to engineer. Just like, whoa.
When I did it with the guy from Accutech, though, I would say it took him 10 minutes.
Oh, really?
To make the product or make that thing on the 3D printer, to actually just design it on their program that they had. Yeah, it didn't take him very long. He was like, yep, let's do this. Because as soon as he had that